Chapter 1928. It was not without reason that Lezavim was called a surpasser. Lezavim's strength was not good, but that was only from Noah's point of view, as well as when compared to Sazak's and Achukka, the two foul existences. In fact, from an objective point of view, Lezavim was definitely worthy of the title of surpasser. First of all, Lezavim was the son of the demon king Lucifer and the mother of demons, Lilith. His bloodline had already surpassed the category of demons. Even his demon wings had the highest grade of 12 pieces, which was the best among demons. Secondly, although Lezavim's strength was far from that of Sazak's and Achukka, he was also beyond the level of the demon king. Even a Sashal might not be his opponent. Therefore, whether it was in terms of bloodline or strength, Lezavim was worthy of the title of a surpasser. Most importantly, those who were known as surpassers all had extraordinary powers that demons could not possess. Sazak's and Achukka were shown in terms of absolute strength. Lezavim was shown in terms of ability. The artifact is nullified. Any power, characteristics, and effects produced by the artifact are ineffective. As long as it is the power of the artifact, it cannot cause any harm, a Sashal said. That man has such an ability that can nullify the power created by the God of the Bible, which is beyond the reach of the various mythical forces. This is what makes that guy special. Nullification of the artifact? Noah was slightly stunned. Lezavim still has such an ability? You didn't use the artifact when you fought with him, right? Asashal seemed to understand something. It's natural that you don't know. That ability is only effective on the artifact. If you didn't use the artifact, you naturally wouldn't have seen it. Fortunately, you are not a human like Chow Chow, who relies heavily on the power of the artifact. Otherwise, you would be in big trouble. Is that so? Noah looked at Asashal. What if it was an artificial artifact created by you? My artificial artifact? Arthashel did not expect Noah to ask such a question. He hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. It shouldn't work either. After all, my artificial divine artifact is a replica of a divine artifact. Since Lezavim's divine artifact is ineffective, and even the original can work, there's no reason why the replica won't work, right? That's true. Noah nodded, but then he remembered something. That's not right. If that guy had the ability to nullify divine equipment, then how could he make the Holy Grail work on him? Could it be that the ability could be controlled by oneself? But that's not right, is it? Noah couldn't help but recall a detail that he had overlooked before. When Lezavim took out the Holy Grail, he didn't touch it at all. Instead, he let the Holy Grail float in his palm or float around him. Did that mean that even Lezavim himself couldn't control that ability? Was it the type that would always be in effect? Once Lezavim touched the Holy Grail would stop functioning? But if that was the case, how could the Holy Grail work on Lezavim? Just as Noah was extremely puzzled, Draeger's voice sounded in Noah's mind. I think that the divine artifact nullification ability should be similar to a defensive mechanism. It can nullify the power of the divine artifact when it comes into contact with the son of the demon king, but it can't nullify the targeted ability, right? What does that mean? The Holy Grail is a power that directly affects life. The target of the ability is life, not an individual. That's why it can go through the divine artifact nullification and work on Lezavim, Draeger explained. In other words, as long as it goes through the divine artifact nullification defense, then the divine artifact nullification can work on Lezavim. The Holy Grail directly targets life, so it doesn't need to come into contact with the divine artifact nullification defense. Draeger's words made Noah raise his eyebrows, and the corner of his mouth slowly rose. Defense? If that's the case, that's right. Draeger confirmed Noah's thoughts. If you use the third ability of the gauntlet, which can penetrate defense, then the son of the demon king's divine artifact nullification won't be a problem. In other words, even the strongest ability that Lezavim was so proud of would not work on Noah. If there was another chance to fight, then Noah would definitely be able to give Lezavim a big surprise. At this time, Asashal said to Noah again. However, the most terrifying thing about Lezavim is not his strength, but his malice. That guy is a real bastard, and I'm sure you've seen it. Even Wally hates him and has always wanted to kill him. I'm worried that, with that guy's level of bastard, after he gets the Holy Grail, he won't just use it to revive the evil dragon and increase his combat power. Then what else can he do? Noah asked subconsciously. Could it be that there's still a terrifying existence that can be revived? I'm not sure, but I'll let the major forces investigate, Asashel said with a very serious tone. I have a feeling that the real crisis is coming. Noah narrowed his eyes slightly and nodded slowly. After that, Asashel said that he would bring Valerie back to the underworld and let the demons, angels, and fallen angels protect her. He would definitely not let the other 2 holy grails in her body be used by people with evil intentions. Moreover, King Kaipesh had already awakened, and Queen Camilla also expressed her willingness to have another discussion. When the vampires were done dealing with the aftermath, they would sit at the negotiating table with the 2 major forces, Kaipesh and Camilla, to promote this time's peace talks. With the existence of the grace of saving the vampiric world, as well as the common enemy that destroyed their home, as well as the promise of the major forces to assist in the reconstruction of the vampiric world in the near future, it was believed that the matter of the peace negotiation could be considered to be completed. In view of this, Noah's group had to continue staying here for a while. Noah had no objections to this. As for the school, Tsang was in charge, so there was nothing to worry about. As for the family, Orpheus also had Aster and Athena to accompany him. Although there were some parts that were worrying, with Athena, the former goddess of wisdom, there shouldn't be any problems. The rest was the matter here. After exchanging opinions and plans with Asashel, Noah brought Lilith out of Valerie's room. As soon as he came out, Noah met someone. Gasper? Noah was surprised for a moment and immediately understood. Are you here to see Valerie? Yes. Gasper's expression seemed a little sad. Although Valerie will be transferred to the underworld soon, I'm still a little worried. Gasper's worry was not without reason. Because Gasper and Valerie were childhood sweethearts. They grew up together and suffered the contempt and disdain of the pure-blooded vampires toward the mixed bloods. They supported each other in their dark lives. That was the reason why Gasper had reacted so strongly to Valerie's name. It was said that the reason Gasper was able to escape from the vampire's territory and meet Leah was because of Valerie's help. Under such circumstances, it was naturally impossible for Gasper not to have a reaction to Valerie's name. After learning about this, Noah was also glad that he did not directly destroy the Holy Grail when facing Lesavim. Otherwise, this timid student of his would probably hate him for the rest of his life. Asashel is helping Valerie with her examination. It should be over soon. Noah patted Gasper's shoulder. You can go in directly. Got it. Gasper quickly responded and walked past Noah. Just as he was about to enter the room, he suddenly stopped and looked in Noah's direction with hesitation in his eyes. Seeing this, Noah seemed to have seen through Gasper's thoughts and said, "Don't worry. If there's a chance, I'll take the Holy Grail back." Gasper's spirits were lifted and he bowed deeply to Noah before entering the room. Noah suddenly smiled. Suddenly, 2 panicked voices were heard again. Teacher. Lord Noah. They saw Gasper's family member, Labelle, and Valerie's team member, Luffy, running over at the same time with a panicked expression and called out. Oh no. The 2 cats are about to fight again. Noah was completely stunned. Chapter 1929. When Noah was led into a room by Labelle and Luffy, the tense atmosphere in the air immediately caught his attention. In the room, a pair of cat sisters were looking at each other. Ugh. Kitten's body tensed up as she stared at her sister with an extremely vigilant and stern gaze. It was as if she could pounce on her sister at any moment, just like an enraged house cat. Meow. Black Song had an incomparably flirtatious smile on her beautiful face. Seeing her sister staring at her with vigilance and sternness, she was completely indifferent. She was like an evil wild cat. The pair of cat sisters did not speak at all. They only looked at each other, but their expressions were completely different. Even their temperaments were as different as heaven and earth. Those who did not know would definitely not think that these two cats were sisters, right? Sensing the tense atmosphere between Kitten and Black Song, Laybell and Luffy timidly hid behind Noah. They grabbed onto Noah's clothes and poked their heads out to look at the sisters looking at each other. Noah also rubbed his forehead as he felt a headache coming on. He asked in a low voice. How did this happen? I don't know either. Laybell subconsciously lowered her voice and answered. I just wanted to find Kitten to eat something together, but when I found Kitten, it was already like this. It was worth mentioning here that Kitten and Laybell's relationship was exceptionally good. Even though Little Kitten seemed to dislike Little Kitten when she first became a member of the Jimmins, quarreling with Little Kitten every day, but as the saying goes, the more you quarrel, the more you develop feelings for each other. Now, Kitten and Laybell's relationship was so good that they stuck together every day. Although everyone in Jimengli's household had a good relationship with each other, there was still a difference in the order of precedence. For example, Leah's and Zhu Nai's relationship was so good that they were like sisters. They were not like master and servant at all. Usually, as the big sisters in the group, they would take care of the other members together. Aisha, Genova, and Irina had gotten along well with each other as the three members of the church. They were so close that they stuck to each other every day and almost never split up. Yudu and Gasper were the only two male members of the Jumanli family, and their relationship was also very good. It was said that they would sometimes go to Issei Hyuga's house together and get along well with him. They even stayed overnight at Issei Hyuga's house together. It made people wonder what the three of them were doing all night. Because of her position as a teacher, Lesvias had more contact with the other teachers in the academy. She was also a big sister and had a good relationship with Laius and Zhu Nai. Still, the war goddess had an unexpected muddle-headed side. She could be considered a muddle-headed big sister. Only Kitten and Laybell were left. In the past, because she lived with Noah at the same time, Kitten had the best relationship with Isha. Now, Kitten and Laybell had started to develop feelings for each other during their quarrel, while Isha was occupied by Genova and Irina. This made Kitten's relationship with Laybell much smoother. Therefore, it was not strange that Laybell would come to Kitten to work with her. However, they did not expect that Black Song would come to Kitten as well, and things would turn out this way. Miss Black Song didn't come here specifically to look for Miss Bain. We were just strolling around the castle because Captain Varley is currently nowhere to be found. Luffy raised her hand weakly. Then, we met Miss Bain here, and things turned out this way. In other words, Black Song and Kitten just happened to run into each other here. It was not that Black Song deliberately went to Kitten to do something to her. Unfortunately, due to their personal grudges, the meeting between Black Song and Kitten had turned into a confrontation. The two sisters probably didn't expect to bump into each other here, so they didn't know what to say and just stared at each other. Little did they know that this kind of atmosphere was too unbearable for those who knew about the grudges between the two. Therefore, as Kitten and Black Song's companions, Laybell and Luffy could not stand this kind of atmosphere and could only run away, looking for Noah to save the day. After understanding the whole situation, Noah narrowed his eyes and looked at Black Song and Kitten, who were silently staring at each other, and barged in helplessly. How long do you want to stare at each other there? Noah directly barged in, and smoothly ignited the tense atmosphere between Black Song and Kitten. Teacher. Kitten acted as if she had been saved, and almost reflexively hid behind Noah, squeezing Laybell and Luffy out. It seemed that Kitten was still very afraid of her sister, and that she was just putting on a brave front earlier. Although they were sisters, Black Song was a wanted criminal who had killed her master, causing Kitten to be regarded as a dangerous person by the higher-ups of the Fiend Realm, and was the main culprit who had almost caused Kitten to be executed. Therefore, Kitten still held a grudge against Black Song, and was very resistant to him. Black Song was naturally the clearest about this. However, this black cat did not have the slightest bit of self-awareness. She blinked at Noah and smiled sweetly. Aya. Why are you here? I'm just greeting Bain, okay? You're not worried that I'll attack by Een, are you? Is that very strange? Noah asked directly. Don't forget, you have a criminal record. Are you referring to the first time Orpheus saw you? Black Song waved his hand. At that time, I was only instructed by Wally to lure you out. Taking by Een away was just convenient, meow. I think so too. Kitten hid behind Noah and poked her head out, staring intently at Black Song. Sister didn't want to take me away in the past, and I don't think you will now, right? That's right, that's right. Black Song nodded with a smile. So, don't worry about what I'll do, meow. Kitten bit her lips when she heard Black Song's nonchalant words, and some resentment appeared on her usually emotionless face. Hey! Laybell stood up for Kitten and pointed at Black Song, shouting, You're not allowed to bully Kitten. You're not allowed to bully Kitten. Woo meow. Black Song blinked again, and the smile on his face became even brighter and more moving. Why? Bullying younger sisters is the privilege of older sisters, meow, but do you see Kitten as your younger sister? Laybell said with some agitation. If you do see Kitten as your younger sister, why did you abandon her back then? Don't you think it's too late to say such things now? Laybell's words caused the tense atmosphere to turn sinister. Kitten bit her lips harder and harder. Black Song still had a smile on his face, as if he didn't care at all. Only Lu Fei actually stood up at this time and looked seriously at Lei Bei Bei. Please don't speak of Miss Black Song like that. Miss Black Song isn't that kind of person. Lu Fei's words made Noah slightly stunned, and a thoughtful light flashed through his eyes. However, Lei Bei Air was completely unconcerned. She thought that Lu Fei was speaking up for Black Gu, and her anger began to rise. She immediately snorted, turned her head away, and said these words. What do you mean by not that kind of person? You dare to do it, but don't dare to admit it? That's not it. Lu Fei retorted. Miss Black Song is just, all right, little Lu Fei, thank you for speaking up for me. However, I'm not even agitated, so why are you so agitated, meow? Black Song shrugged, looking indifferent. Anyway, I'm just a bad cat. There's nothing wrong with that, meow. It had to be said that Black Song's indifferent tone and frivolous words were extremely infuriating to those in the know. As expected. Kitten couldn't help but murmur. Big sister is the worst. Black Song glanced at Kitten, indifferent to Kitten's murmurs. However, Noah, who had been observing Black Song all this time, noticed it. There was a flash of sadness in Hei Ji's eyes for a split second. Noah's eyes flashed and he suddenly smiled when he caught the sadness in her eyes. Is that so? I think Black Song is rather cute. In that instant, the entire place quieted down. A different kind of tension from before, and a different kind of heaviness from before, a somewhat strange atmosphere began to replace the surrounding atmosphere, permeating the air. Chapter 1930. At this moment, all the girls present turned their gazes towards Noah, each with a different expression. Teacher. Kitten looked at Noah with eyes full of disbelief. Teacher. You. Laybell's expression was extremely stiff. Wah wah. Wah wah wah. Lu Fei's face turned red. As for Black Song, her eyes widened. After looking at Noah for a while, she suddenly cheered and pounced on Noah, giving Noah a fright. Wah meow. That's great meow. Black Song was overjoyed as she shouted. Little brother God Slayer's favorability has finally been maxed out. It really wasn't easy meow. Maxed out your head. Noah had an embarrassed expression. Do you think this is a game? You want to farm favorability? Indeed, when Miss Black Song has nothing to do, she would sneak into the game center to play games. Lu Fei seemed to have realized something, and her face turned even redder. So it's that kind of game? It seemed that little sister Lu Fei had completely misunderstood. At this moment, little Kitten and Laybell finally came to their senses. Sister. Kitten glared at Black Song, looking somewhat agitated. What did you do to teacher? Kitten thought that Noah's abnormal behavior was because Black Song had used some sort of bewitching spell. No. He couldn't have been tricked by that bad cat. Teacher. Lei Bei Er cried out in panic. That's an illusion. It's all an illusion. Even Label thought that Noah had been hit by some sort of spell that made him lose his mind. It really made her speechless. Indeed, Black Song's actions had a sort of bewitching feeling, but that did not mean that Black Song was a casual woman. In fact, not only did Black Song keep her chastity, she definitely would not use any sort of bewitching spell. The reason why she usually acted so charmingly was because of her casual nature. Cats were rather amorous creatures to begin with. As a cat demon, it was not strange for Black Song to have such a personality. On the other hand, Kitten, undoubtedly Nikomata, was so serious that it was abnormal. However, even if it was a kitten, didn't it tempt Noah before because of the arrival of the estrus? Therefore, frivolous behavior did not mean that Black Song was a casual woman. Moreover, even if they didn't use any magic, there probably wouldn't be anyone who thought that Black Song wasn't good-looking, right? It was a fact that Black Song was cute. However, the cuteness Noah was referring to was not her appearance, but her heart. Bang! With a muffled sound, a fist smashed into Hei Ge's head. Meow! Black Song suddenly let out a sorrowful cry. He covered his head and squatted down. Noah slowly retracted his fist and glared at Hei Gu in exasperation. I'm just praising you, and you're already sticking to me. What are you going to do if I continue to flatter you? What else can we do, meow? Black Song said matter-of-factly as he rubbed his aching head. Of course, little brother Godslayer. You can do whatever you want, meow. Noah was speechless. Was this wild cat really not a casual woman? Noah began to doubt his previous thoughts. On the other hand, Kitten, Label, and Lu Fei stared blankly at the development in front of them. They were at a loss. What was the situation now? Was there any more charm or magic? Noah sighed softly and ignored Black Song, who was covering his head and complaining. He turned around, squatted down, and looked at Kitten. Hey, Kitten. Noah looked straight at Kitten and asked very seriously. Have you ever wondered why Black Song killed his own master and left you behind? Kitten was stunned. Label was also stunned. Lu Fei kept her mouth shut. As for Black Song, his complaints came to an abrupt end. He stopped fooling around and looked at Noah with eyes full of boredom. I say, little brother Godslayer, don't tell me you're also planning to intervene in the matter between me and Baiyin? Are you trying to say that I'm meddling in other people's business? Noah glanced at Black Song. That might be true for you, but for me, Kitten's business is my business. I don't only care about your business, but also Kitten's business. If you want to protest, then blame your parents. Why did they make you two sisters? Black Song was immediately speechless. Kitten, on the other hand, calmed down. She glanced at the silent Black Song and then lowered her head. She could not help but speak. I hate Big Sister. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that I hate her. No matter what reason Big Sister had back then, she abandoned me. That is the truth. That's right. No matter what reason she had, it was the truth that Black Song had abandoned Kitten. Moreover, isn't the reason why that cat killed her master very clear? Label said angrily. Because her talent was too strong, she began to stand out after being reincarnated as a demon. In the blink of an eye, she surpassed her master and was immersed in her own power, unable to extricate herself. In the end, she was unwilling to be controlled by a master who was weaker than her. She killed her master and escaped. I've seen many such outliers. Basically, those who killed their own masters and became stray demons had fallen for similar reasons. Therefore, in the eyes of Kitten, Label, and the others, Black Song's betrayal was not something to be doubted, right? However, Noah still wanted to say something. Indeed, there are many people who are immersed in their own power, unable to extricate themselves. But do you think Black Song is like that? Hearing this, Kitten and Label both looked in Hei-Ge's direction, only to receive a malicious smile from Hei-Gu. I also like the feeling of gaining power, Black Song said with a smile. Not only gaining power, but I also like the feeling of fighting with power. Otherwise, I wouldn't have joined the disaster group and Wally's team. This was the truth. In Wally's team, apart from Luffy, the others were probably all battle maniacs. They were completely unable to settle down, which was why they were attracted to Wally and moved together with him. Even if they were wanted by both orthodox mythological organizations and terrorist villains at the same time, they followed Wally without complaint and fought all the way. However, liking to fight doesn't mean that you're an evil person. Having great power doesn't mean that you'll be devoured, Noah said lightly. Otherwise, I'd be the greatest evil in this world. Everyone was speechless. Thinking about it carefully, among the people present, the one who was most likely to be immersed in power was Noah. Noah was only a weak human, but he had a terrifying power that was almost invincible in the world. Even if all the Asura gods and Buddhas of the mythological organizations combined, they would definitely not be able to defeat him. He was completely capable of doing whatever he wanted in this world. If Noah really wanted to, he could kill all the humans and capture all the races. That was absolutely possible. How did it feel to have a god lick your toes? Did you feel superior when you let the Demon King drink the water that you washed your feet with? Taking in all the famous goddesses, female demons, and female angels of all races as his own, living a life of pleasure every night, and doing whatever he wanted every day. For a human, was there any temptation? And if Noah really wanted to do all these, who dared to say that Noah couldn't do it? Who dared to say that they could stop him? No one. No one could stop Noah. As mentioned before, Noah could do whatever he wanted. However, Noah wouldn't do that. The real evil is not the behavior, but the heart of a person. Noah said indifferently. What you see and hear may be false, but your heart won't lie. With that said, Noah looked at Kitten and asked. You and Black Song have depended on each other since you were young and grew up together. Ask yourself, is the sister who grew up with you the kind of person who would be so immersed in power that she would ignore you and even abandon you? Kitten opened her mouth, but her voice was so hoarse that it shocked her. Noah looked at Black Song again and said. Ask your heart too. Do you really think that it doesn't matter how Kitten sees you? Black Song lowered his head and fell silent. I think that in this world, there's nothing more worth protecting than family. Noah sighed. It's not impossible to break off the relationship, but it's not that easy to repair it. So, I think that you two sisters should have a good chat. Otherwise, under the threat of the group of disasters, who knows when you'll be separated by life and death. By then, it'll be too late to regret it. Kitten and Black Song looked at each other, and there was an indescribable wave in their eyes. The entire place returned to silence once again. However, the atmosphere this time was not tense, nor was it heavy, nor was it strange. There was only a hint of sadness. Looking at the silent Kitten and Hei-Gu, Noah stood up, looked at Labelle and Luffy, and spoke softly. He said softly, let's go out and let the two sisters have a good chat. Luffy nodded without any objections. Labelle no longer objected and nodded with a complicated expression. Just like that, Noah brought Labelle and Luffy out of the room and closed the door. The two sisters were left alone. They looked at each other and did not speak for a long time. However, this silence did not last for long. Sister. Kitten's voice was somewhat sobbing. Please tell me the truth from back then. Hearing this, Black Song understood. He could not escape. Chapter 1931. After retreating from the room where the two sisters were, Luffy immediately closed the door, letting the soft sound of the door closing echo in the corridor. Seeing the door mercilessly close, Labelle still seemed somewhat worried. Hey, teacher. Labelle worriedly said. Is there really no problem? What problem could there be? Noah shrugged. Don't tell me Black Song will eat Kitten. If she really wanted to do that, she wouldn't have waited until now, right? But I'm still a little worried. Laybell could not help but say this, turning her head to ask Lu Fei. Why would Kitten's elder sister want to kill her own master? Hearing Laybell's question, Lu Fei fell silent. After hesitating for a while, she sighed. Actually, I've only heard about it from Miss Black Song, Lu Fei said hesitantly. Miss Black Song said that her previous master was a bastard, very annoying, and that it was more comfortable to live with Captain Varley. A bastard? Noah thoughtfully smiled. It seems that I more or less understand Black Song's difficulties. Laybell tilted her head, seemingly still not understanding. What do you mean? Actually, the reason shouldn't be hard to guess. It's very easy to think of it, but you just don't want to think about it. Noah looked at the puzzled Laybell and could not help but sigh. Laybell, although your family treats you like a little princess, and Laius, as your master, cares for you family members very much, please think carefully. How many demons in the demon world treat their own family members with sincerity? Laybell's pretty face could not help but change slightly. The eldest daughter of the Phoenix family was not an idiot. On the contrary, she was a military figure. Usually, when the Zymonts were on missions, she would often exchange opinions with Queen Laius and formulate countermeasures. Thus, she had always been deeply trusted by Laius. Therefore, with Laybell's intelligence, she immediately understood Noah's words. In the eyes of ordinary people, demons are evil to begin with, right? Noah could not help but laugh. Although that's what I say, I won't kill all of them. At the very least, I have a good relationship with the current Devil King, Jimenez's family, and Sidi's family. But, just like how there are good people and evil people, there are good gods, and there are evil gods and evil gods like Loki from Northern Europe, there are also bastards among demons, right? And Black Song is the highest-ranking cat elf of the Nikomata clan. Not only is his bloodline pure and noble, but his talent is also astonishing. He is proficient in magic, immortal arts, and demonic arts. It's not hard to guess what will happen if such a seedling falls into the hands of a bastard demon, Noah said calmly. If the previous owner was a vicious person, then he would have used Black Song's power to commit all sorts of crimes. If the previous owner was a narrow-minded person, then he would have been jealous of the excellence of his dependents. It wouldn't have been strange if he had wanted to personally destroy his dependents. Since Black Song had described his previous owner as a bastard, then I guess that the previous owner must have been greedy for the amazing talent that Black Song had displayed. Greedy? Laybell was stunned at first, but then she suddenly trembled. Could it be, have you thought of it? Noah curled his lips. That's right. The power of a cat elf is already so tempting. Generally speaking, if there's a second cat elf, no matter which demon it is, they would want to take it in their pocket, right? Black Song and Kitten had depended on each other since they were young and had always grown up with each other. Even after Black Song became a family of a demon, Kitten had always followed him and never left him. Under such circumstances, according to Noah's words, Laybell would really be an idiot if she still did not understand the meaning. In other words, Black Song's former master set his sights on Kitten? Laybell was somewhat in disbelief. Kitten's older sister killed her own master just to protect Kitten? Of course, this is only my guess. Noah turned his head and glanced at the tightly shut door as he muttered. But, seeing Black Song's reaction, this guess should be the most convincing, right? Laybell did not know what to say. At this time, Lu Fei spoke softly. Once, Miss Black Song encountered a strong enemy. Although she defeated her opponent in the end, she was heavily injured. Even I was frightened, but she did not care at all. Lu Fei recalled the situation at that time and lowered her voice. According to what Miss Black Song said at the time, she had undergone extremely chaotic strengthening training in the past. Compared to that, her current injuries are nothing. Noah and Laybell understood what Lu Fei meant. Without a doubt, that so-called chaotic strengthening training could only have been personally inflicted by Black Song's former master. There was no other possibility. This was enough to show what kind of person Black Song's former master was. Of course, it was also possible that Black Song was lying. But putting aside Noah, as a pure-blooded demon of the Phoenix clan, Label knew that such things were not rare in the fiend realm. Just as Noah had said, there were good people and evil people. Although not all demons were as evil as the legend said, there were truly evil demons. Demons generally revered strength. After the demon chess pieces were developed and superior demons were able to have their own dependence, this concept of revering strength still affected most demons. Thus, in order to obtain powerful dependents and servants with limitless potential, many demons would use unscrupulous means. Some of them would force and harm the person they liked, forcing the other party to become their dependents. Some would conduct inhumane training on their dependents, completely disregarding the safety and condition of their dependents, blindly strengthening them. Some would even use the method of extracting potential and life force to make their dependents fight with all their might, and then abandon them when they were no longer of any use. It was extremely vicious. Even Label's brother, Laia's former fiancé, Riesel, did not treat his dependents as his personal property and order them around as a matter of course. On the other hand, the pure-blooded demons of the Gimli clan were known for their gentleness. They sincerely cared for their dependents, which was why such things did not happen. Like vampires, demons are also a race that lives in the dark, Noah mentioned, intentionally or otherwise. Many of the demons' bad habits and ideas are not flattering. That's why the 4 demon kings, Sazax, Achuka, Seraph, and Felubium, spared no effort in promoting peace between the various factions in an attempt to change the concept of the race with the change of the world. Perhaps Athaziel, the governor of the fallen angels, has similar thoughts. Noah spread his hands. After all, the fallen angels are also evil in the Bible. There must be some problematic people among them, right? Every family had its own problems. Since even a family was like this, there was no need to mention a race. Although Noah was a loner, he was also the leader of 2 guilds in another world. As the leader of a guild, Noah knew very well what kind of consideration and labor he had to put in. Therefore, Noah's words were undoubtedly quite persuasive. In short, let's leave the matter of Black Song and Kitten to them, Noah said to Label and Luffy. We'll just quietly watch from the sidelines. Label and Luffy both nodded. Then, Noah, Label, and Luffy left the scene. Label and Luffy returned to their respective residences, probably very moved by Noah's words. Noah, on the other hand, brought Lilith, who had stayed outside the room. Just as he was about to return to the room, he encountered an unexpected person on the way. Looking at the silver-haired youth slowly walking toward him, Noah stopped in his tracks. Varley seemed to have only just noticed Noah. He raised his head and met Noah's gaze. Noah noticed it at that moment. Varley's eyes and expression were somewhat abnormal compared to before. If the previous Varley was a pure warrior who only knew how to press forward with indomitable will, then the current Varley was like a madman who had stopped halfway and was hindered by something. The fighting spirit in his heart was replaced by another emotion. What emotion was that? Hatred. Noah saw hatred in Varley's eyes. What the hell happened? Chapter 1932. At this moment, the sky was almost bright and the commotion in Kaipei Royal City had gradually subsided. In the corridor, Noah and Wally looked at each other, but no one spoke. Instead, Lilith, who had been held by Noah, twitched her nose and looked at Wally. Dragon. Lilith mumbled as if she was in a dream. The smell of a white dragon, Lilith's words immediately made Noah and Wally turn their eyes to her. I see, Wally said with a blank expression. Is this the upper half of Orpheus? Noah nodded and said so. Her name is Lilith. Is that so? Wally closed his eyes, but his voice was trembling. That bastard actually gave Orpheus half a name like that. The name Lilith originally belonged to the mother of demons. And Lesavim was the son of demon king Lucifer and the mother of demons, Lilith. In other words, this name should have belonged to Wally's great-grandmother. I heard that the person currently leading the disaster is Lesavim. Wally opened his eyes and looked at Noah. You've seen him, right? Not only have I seen him, Noah answered truthfully. We even fought. Really? Wally's expression became serious. What do you think of that guy? Not much, Noah said without mercy. He's just a bastard. I feel the same. That guy is too despicable. He really doesn't deserve the name of Lucifer. Wally clenched his fist. His tone was full of sarcasm and sincere hatred. But, although he's despicable, that guy's strength and ability are really troublesome. Varley's face was filled with unwillingness as he spoke. To be honest, it was the first time Noah saw Wally like this. This kind of performance was simply not seen from Wally in the past. Coupled with the sarcastic and hateful expression when Wally mentioned Lesavim's grandfather must have done something bad to Wally. Come to think of it, Wally's background was something worth pondering. Why did this gifted child who inherited the bloodline of Lucifer and the power of the White Dragon Emperor join the camp of the fallen angels and be raised by Athashel instead of staying with Lesavim, his blood relative? There must be a reason behind this, right? There was only one thing that could be confirmed. That was, Wally didn't treat Lesavim as a family member at all. He even hated him. If possible, Wally would want to kill Lesavim more than anyone else, right? Unfortunately, this goal was too difficult for Wally. Although Wally was a descendant of Lucifer and had extremely high-level abilities, most of Wally's strength was limited to the artifact. Although his strength was not weak, at best, he was only at the level of the highest level demon. Only by using the artifact could Wally jump to the Demon King level. Even when using the Tyrannosaurus Rex, in terms of strength alone, he was comparable to the top 10 in the world. His strength was not weaker than the famous Shura gods and Buddhas. However, the power from the artifact was ineffective against Lesavim, who had the ability to nullify the artifact. Once Wally went up against Lesavim, he would definitely lose. After all, not counting the artifact, Wally was at most at the level of the highest level demon. As for Lesavim, as a surpasser, even if his strength was not as good as Sazavim and Achuka, he was much higher than the Demon King level. Without the artifact, Wally probably couldn't last a few moves in Lesavim's hands, right? Even if he used the artifact, in front of the artifact nullification ability, Wally couldn't do anything to Lesavim and was destined to lose. In this way, how could Wally be willing? But if it's you, even if you don't use the artifact, you can still defeat Lesavim, right? Wally stared at Noah closely. I'm right, right? What a pity. Noah didn't answer, but said indifferently. In the end, he still escaped. As if Wally had expected it, he lowered his head and remained silent. Another cosmology. Wally said in a low voice. That's the name, right? Noah was slightly taken aback, and immediately nodded. Did you use it on that guy? Wally asked very solemnly. I used the ability called Another Cosmology. This time, Noah didn't answer. Instead, he looked straight at Wally and said, Don't worry. What do you want to ask? Wally was silent again, and finally spoke after a while. I just want to know if I have the possibility of defeating that guy now. Although he said so, Wally's expression told Noah that he already knew the answer to this question. After all, the other party was his grandfather. Even if Wally didn't do his duty, it was impossible for Wally not to know the general details of Lesavim. So, Wally probably also understood, right? If the divine artifact was really nullified, then the current him was definitely not Lesavim's opponent. It was just that Wally didn't want to admit it, which was why he had so many emotions. Frankly speaking, this kind of Wally really subverted Noah's impression of him. It seemed that the grudge between Wally and Lesavim was deeper than Noah thought. So, Noah said so. If you want me to tell you the truth, I can only say that even if you have mastered Tyrannosaurus, if you don't find a way to nullify Lesavim's divine artifact, then you absolutely can't defeat him. This sentence made Wally clench his fists tighter and tighter, and he even gritted his teeth. Is that really the case? More unwillingness than before appeared on Wally's face. At this time, Noah's tone changed. But, you should have a card in your hand to defeat that guy. Wally was suddenly stunned. Noah looked at Wally and reached out his hand. Clank. A burst of crimson light flashed, and a ferocious dragonclaw-like gauntlet appeared in Noah's hand. Immediately, Noah moved. Without any warning, Noah fiercely stomped on the ground and rushed to the front of Wally at a leisurely speed. He clenched his arm that was covered by the gauntlet, and with a whistling wind, he threw a punch at Wally. Wally didn't expect Noah to launch such a sudden attack. However, as the White Dragon Emperor who had always yearned for battle, Wally's combat skills weren't bad, and he reacted almost instantly. However, the distance between Noah and Wally wasn't that far, and the attack came so suddenly, and Wally's condition wasn't quite right, so for a moment, Wally didn't have time to use the divine artifact. At this moment, Wally could only increase the magic power in his body. Wang! A defensive magic array immediately unfolded in front of Wally, protecting him like a barrier. This defensive magic array that was hastily set up could only block the attack of a superior devil. For an invincible supermaster like Noah, it was almost useless. However, Wally, who was extremely sensitive, discovered that although Noah's punch came very suddenly, its momentum wasn't that terrifying, and its power wasn't that great either. At best, it was comparable to the full-force attack of an intermediate devil. The full-force attack of an intermediate devil? That level of attack was simply child's play for Wally, and he could completely block it with this defensive magic array. However, a second later, Wally realized that he was wrong. Clank! The fist that was aimed at Wally landed heavily on the defensive magic array, and it caused a sound similar to the collision of steel. However, in the next moment, a language sounded from the crimson gauntlet. Penetrate. Suddenly, the impact of the fist directly penetrated the defensive magic array, and like an invisible force, it slammed into Wally's chest. Bang! Along with the muffled sound, Wally squeezed out a muffled groan from his throat, and his body suddenly shook as if he was hit by a truck. He rubbed against the ground and slid out violently, only stopping after a while. Feeling the pain in his chest, Wally raised his head and looked at Noah in shock. What just happened? Chapter 1933. In fact, Varley was not unable to understand what had just happened. To put it simply, Varley successfully resisted Noah's attack. However, for some unknown reason, Noah's attack directly penetrated Varley's defense and hit Varley. What is that? Varley asked almost subconsciously. Is that also your ability? Before Noah had time to answer, a pair of light wings flashed out behind Varley. No, that's not the ability of the God Slayer, that's the ability of the Red Dragon Emperor, Drake. A Rubian's surprised voice sounded from the light wings. That was penetration, right? But how is that possible? What's wrong, Arubian? Arubian? Varley quickly asked. Do you know what happened just now? Of course, as the White Dragon Emperor, how can I not know what that is? Arubian's voice was full of surprise. That's the third ability of the Red Dragon Emperor, Drake. The third ability? Varley was stunned at first, then he noticed the key point. The ability of his life? That's right, Arubian said. When I, the twin heavenly dragons, was sealed into the divine artifact by the God of the Bible, my abilities were split into several parts. Only 2 of my abilities are left for the host to use. The red one is for multiply and transfer, while mine is for have and absorb. It has never changed. As for the rest of the abilities, according to the God of the Bible, it seems that they have been removed. Arubian did not hide the surprise and disbelief in his voice. Why did the red one suddenly have a third ability? Undoubtedly, this has never happened before. Of course, Arubian didn't know that Drake was just a soul now, residing in the artifact, and his ability was only reproduced by the artifact. In this regard, Noah opened his mouth and was about to say something, but Drake's voice sounded from the cage. Arubian, do you really think that the rest of our abilities were removed by the God of the Bible? Drake's words stunned Arubian. Although I don't know why the God of the Bible, as a god, created the god of annihilation to give humans the power to kill gods, but since even the forbidden hand, which can destroy the balance of power, and the god of annihilation, which can seal monsters, has the power of tyrant, compared to these, the power we had when we were alive shouldn't be considered dangerous, so there's no need to remove it, right? Drake's voice became low. At the very least, might flame and your poison, compared to the forbidden hand and Tyrannosaurus, should be more likely to be preserved, right? This. Arubian was a little speechless. On the other hand, Noah's attention was attracted by the other information revealed by Dalag. Your flame and Arubian's poison? Noah asked in surprise. What does that mean? This time, both Drake and Arubian were silent. Only Wally seemed to know something, but he also remained silent. Seeing this, Noah frowned. Could it be that in addition to penetration, Drake has another ability? And that ability is more terrifying than the forbidden hand and Tyrannosaurus? If there is such a powerful ability, why didn't Drake say it? Under the effect of the artifact, that ability should have been reproduced, right? Don't think about it, partner. Drake sighed. After meeting Arubian, I stopped using that ability. In fact, I've almost forgotten about it. Unless Arubian uses the power of poison, it might be a good thing for me to keep my flame sealed. Hearing this, Noah's eyes flickered, and he didn't say anything more. Although he was a little interested in the so-called flame and poison, it seemed that Drake and Arubian had their own difficulties, so it was better not to ask about it here. Back to the topic. Drake said as if he wanted to ease the atmosphere. I think that after the God of the Bible sealed us in the artifact, he didn't divide our power into several parts. Instead, he imposed some kind of seal on our power, leaving only the most basic 2 abilities. The rest of the abilities need to be awakened by meeting certain conditions. So, the reason why the previous hosts didn't awaken the 3rd ability was because they didn't meet the conditions? Arubian understood what Drake meant. And your host met this condition, so he unsealed the ability of penetration? My host also didn't meet the conditions, Drake explained. It's just that he reproduced my ability from when I was alive in another way. This method can only be used by him. You should think of it as his uniqueness. Wally and Arubian suddenly both laughed bitterly, which was very rare. Uniqueness? Indeed, if a person who broke the rules had an artifact that also broke the rules, then it was obvious how special it was. This generation's host is really special. Arubian sighed. On one side is the God Slayer, and on the other side is Lucifer, but at the same time, he became our host, surpassing the previous Red Dragon Emperor and White Dragon Emperor. If the God of the Bible was not dead and saw this situation, I wonder what he would think. I don't know what the God of the Bible would think, but this time the host is very special, and I have to admit it, Drake said in a deep voice. In the past, the hosts would only be immersed in the power of the 2 heavenly dragons, unable to extricate themselves. In the end, they either led to self-destruction or continued the confrontation from when we were alive until death. This time, the hosts of the 2 heavenly dragons have all deviated from the trajectory of the previous generations. Not only have they developed in a completely different direction, but they are also not obsessed with the red and white confrontation. What's more, they have even cooperated together before. It's really incredible. Arubian sighed. In addition, the dragon god, who has always been in a transcendent position in the past, has also entered the world, and divided into 2 and came to our side. You have also regained the ability from when you were alive. It feels like the wheel that has been stagnant since we fought to the death seems to have started to move again. That's why, Arubian, Drake's voice rang out clearly. Our destiny, which began in this generation, seems to be over. Is that so? Arubian's tone became a little complicated, but also a little relieved. Yes, it's time to end it. The more powerful the dragon, the purer it was. Because of a reason that had long been forgotten, they had been fighting until now, and because of a sudden emotion, they announced the end of their destiny. The dragon side of the Red Dragon Emperor Drake and the White Dragon Emperor Arubian was fully displayed in front of Noah and Wally, and it was surprising. However, at this moment, Noah and Wally both understood Drake and Arubian. Now, all the legendary evil dragons have been resurrected and gathered in one camp, which was completely unimaginable in the past. Noah opened and closed his palms that covered the gauntlet and said so. In that case, it's time for you two dragons to change the situation. You can't stay in the past. My goal is also in a higher place. Wally said as if he was talking to himself. The final opponent I want to fight is not the Red Dragon Emperor who is immersed in the battle of destiny, but the invincible Red Dragon Emperor. With that said, Wally raised his eyes and looked at Noah. And the equally invincible God Slayer. Noah met Wally's gaze and smiled slightly. I welcome your challenge at any time. Wally suddenly smiled, and his smile was full of fighting spirit. In short, there's only one thing I want to say, and that is the ability of the two dragons when they were alive hasn't been lost, and they still exist in the divine artifact. Drake said solemnly. If you continue to exhaust the power of the divine artifact, then the other abilities that belong to the White Dragon Emperor may awaken. And my penetration ability is the ability to ignore defense, and let the attack directly affect the opponent's body. Even if Lezivim's divine artifact is ineffective, I can still penetrate it and cause damage to him. Noah looked directly at Wally. The two dragons are equal existences. Since Lezivim can't do anything about the Red Dragon Emperor's ability, then as the White Dragon Emperor, you must have the ability to restrain him, but it hasn't been awakened yet. Unawakened, power. Wally raised his hand and stared at it. Go after it. Noah said so. Go after the power to defeat the Demon King's son. Wally's eyes lit up again, and then, he nodded heavily. Chapter 1934. After that, Noah and his party stayed in the world of vampires for another week or so, waiting for the vampires to clean up the aftermath of the war. After cleaning up, King Copernicus and Queen Camilla finally found time to sit at the negotiating table with Noah and Asashel to discuss the peace treaty. After this disaster, King Saipesh and Queen Camilla seemed to have realized that the current situation would no longer allow the vampires to be self-contained and secluded themselves from the world. In that case, it would only lead to another disaster. In addition, the rebellion of the internal members had left a deep impression on the two of them, as well as the unstinting assistance of the other forces. Both King Copernicus and Queen Camilla had changed their minds and no longer insisted on their previous ideas. Under such circumstances, King Copernicus and Queen Camilla first made peace with Noah and Asashel as witnesses, announcing the end of the civil strife in the world of vampires for hundreds of years. Then, they agreed to the conclusion of the peace treaty and became allies with all the mythical forces. At this point, all the foreign races in the world had concluded the peace treaty, and no one was left out. As a witness to the peace treaty, Noah successfully urged all the mythical forces to conclude the peace treaty, and he would continue to supervise the implementation of the peace treaty in the future. If any force violated the peace treaty and stirred up trouble, then Noah would personally take action and make that force suffer. It could be said that Noah was the suppressive force of all the mythical forces in the world. Moreover, basically, all the mythical forces made the choice to conclude the peace treaty because they were afraid of Noah's power. Therefore, after the vampires became the last to join the peace treaty, this unprecedented trans-century, trans-mythical, and trans-racial peace treaty became a crucial part of history, laying a great foundation for the future world pattern. In view of the fact that the person who promoted the birth of this peace treaty was Noah, and Noah was world famous for his ability to simulate another cosmology, this peace treaty was named the Star Creation Agreement. There was no doubt that this was a compromise that could be recorded in the history of various mythological systems. Under such circumstances, Noah's name as the God Slayer was also destined to be recorded in the history books. It would be known by the new generation of the various mythological forces, and it would be passed down for hundreds, thousands, and thousands of generations until eternity. In this event of great historical significance, Varley, Black Song, Luffy, Arthur, Beautiful Monkey, and Fenrir were removed from the wanted list. Their inclusion in the fallen angel camp became a small matter and did not arouse much objection. When the vampire world was in chaos, Wally's team acted as allies and saved many vampires from the evil dragons, making a certain degree of contribution to the peace negotiations between the vampires. In the end, just as Asashel had expected, even though many mythological forces expressed their dissatisfaction with the whitewashing of Wally's team, the matter was left unsettled. In other words, from today onwards, Wally's team was officially an ally. They no longer needed to hide. There were 2 episodes worth mentioning. The first was the reconciliation between Black Song and Kitten. After learning the truth from Black Song, Kitten seemed to have cried for the whole night, but she returned to normal the next day and got along with Black Song again. Although Black Song and Kitten had become somewhat distant from each other due to the estrangement of many years, the 2 of them originally had a very deep foundation of feelings. After some time, they would one day return to how they were before, or even better than before, right? The second was the hidden power in Gasper's body. After the turmoil of the vampires, Lias brought Gasper to find Gasper's biological father and asked about the hidden power that Elmaine Shelton had mentioned. Noah heard about the results of the inquiry later and was shocked. With Gasper's father telling the truth and Asashel assisting in the investigation and examination, Lias told Noah so. Just like the divine artifact of the 2 heavenly dragons has the souls of the Red Dragon Emperor and the White Dragon Emperor, and the other divine artifacts also have monsters sealed. The divine artifact in Gasper's body has the consciousness fragment of Balor, the demon god of Celtic mythology. Balor. Balor was the evil god in Celtic mythology, the king of the deep-sea giants named Fomer, and also the demon god who controlled the dark dragon of New Moon, Clon Kvotch. According to legend, demon god Balor possessed a demon eye that could kill all living things within his field of vision. Even the divine king of the Danu divine race, Nuada, was severely injured by his demon eye. In the end, he was killed by Balor's subordinate, the dark dragon Clon Kua. It was not until sun god Rouge became the new god king of the Danu gods that this evil demon god was killed and fell. And before he died, Balor's consciousness fragment was born. The reincarnation of the demon god's consciousness fragment. That was Gasper's true identity. Gasper's divine artifact that could stop time was born from the residue of Balor's power. After all, as the user of the demonic eye, Balor could be said to be the most famous one. Although Gasper's forbidden Balor view is powerful, it is still far from the legendary demonic eye that can kill people directly with its gaze, and even kill gods. That was what Asashel said to Noah on the day he found out the truth about Gasper. So, in Gasper's body, there must be other powers hidden. Divine artifacts are really interesting things. From legendary dragons to legendary monsters, even demon gods can reside in them. The God of the Bible who created the divine artifact is really a terrifying existence. But, because of this territory makes me feel like I can't stop even if I want to. As he said that, Asashel volunteered to help Gasper develop the hidden powers in his body. Gasper himself was very afraid of this. Suddenly turning from a mixed-blood vampire into the reincarnation of the demon god's consciousness fragment, this kind of super development setting, most people might not be able to accept, let alone the timid Gasper. However, Asashel managed to persuade Gasper to change his mind. Don't be afraid of the power in your body, and don't be afraid of yourself. Whether or not you are the reincarnation of the demon god's consciousness fragment, you are still you. I won't let you be devoured by the demon god's power. You can also use this opportunity to become stronger. Perhaps in the future, you will have the chance to take back the Holy Grail with your own hands. Gasper, who was still afraid at the beginning, finally nodded after being persuaded. If he could really develop all the hidden powers in his body, there would be a day when Gasper would become a new demon surpasser, wouldn't he? A surpasser who combined the powers of demon god, vampire, demon, and human. His potential was unimaginable. Just like that, Noah's group finally returned to Chariot King Town after finishing their business in the vampire's territory. In an apartment in Chariot King Town, 2 petite girls were looking at each other in an indescribable silence. At the side, Aster and Athena also looked at the 2 girls who looked about the same age as them and exchanged glances with each other. Not only do they look the same, but even their aura, temperament, and aura are exactly the same. Athena expressed such a thought. Other than the fact that they are the same person, there is no second thought. I can feel the exact same power from the two dragon gods. Aster looked at Noah expressionlessly. Master, do you intend to let the two dragon gods reunite as one? Reunite as one? Noah turned his gaze to Orpheus and Lilith. After looking at each other for a while, Lilith suddenly leaned forward like a small animal and leaned close to Orpheus. She sniffed and called out softly. The other Lilith, although it wasn't obvious on the surface, Lilith's voice was much more emotional than before. She seemed to be rather happy. Orpheus extended her hand and patted Lilith's head like an elder sister. Her face was still expressionless, but her eyes were fixed on Lilith and didn't move away. One had to admit that this scene was rather lovey-dovey. Therefore, Noah smiled. That doesn't matter anymore. Chapter 1935. In the beginning, when half of Orpheus' power was taken away by the heroes and sent back to the disaster squad, Noah did want to take back the power and return it to Orpheus. It had been mentioned several times before that although only half of Orpheus' power was taken away, it made Orpheus, infinite, become limited. In terms of strength, it was not as simple as being reduced by half. But even so, Orpheus, whose strength had been greatly reduced, still had the strength to surpass the top 10 experts in the world. His strength had exceeded 4 digits, and he was in an ambiguous position between 3 and 4 digits. He was far from what the other Asuras, gods, and Buddhas, who were only in the 4 digits, could compare to. It was conceivable that if half of the power was taken back and the limited returned to unlimited, what kind of state would Orpheus' original power return to? To be fair, if Noah lost half of his power, he would want to take it back no matter what. Due to this mentality, Noah wanted to help Orpheus regain the lost power at the beginning. On the contrary, Orpheus did not care about this at all. Aster and Athena naturally knew Noah's thoughts. So, after Noah brought Lilith back, Aster asked Noah if he planned to reunite Orpheus and Lilith. However, that was equivalent to erasing Lilith's existence. Although they did not spend much time together, Noah could not do that kind of thing. Lilith was no longer an individual who simply had half of Orpheus' power, but another Orpheus was born from that half of power. Leswium did not erase Lilith's emotions and allowed Lilith to retain the mind of a 4 or 5-year-old child. Perhaps he thought that compared to an emotionless puppet, a child like Lilith was easier to control? In short, in this way, Noah had no reason to erase Lilith. And Orpheus didn't seem to care about this. Instead, he acknowledged Lilith's existence and accepted her as a sister, which couldn't be better. Don't think that Orpheus did not have his own thoughts just because he stayed there quietly all day. Orpheus was actually very afraid of loneliness. Back then, the reason why Wally had brought Orpheus out of calamity was because Orpheus seemed to be very lonely. Noah had also asked Orpheus what he was doing when he was in the disaster group. At that time, Orpheus had answered Noah in this way. Sit in a chair, stay in the room, say your wish, and give them a snake. That was all. In the disaster squad, Orpheus' life was just like that. It was more like being used as a machine than a human's life. Noah, who now had some understanding of Orpheus and knew how innocent, naive, and afraid of loneliness Orpheus was, couldn't imagine how lonely Orpheus was back then. Therefore, Noah had to admit that it was the first time he had the urge to annihilate the entire disaster syndicate. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't know the location of the disaster squad's headquarters at that time, Noah would have definitely taken action. However, later on, Orpheus had added another sentence. Wally, he talked to me. Even that battle maniac couldn't stand it and took the initiative to chat with Orpheus? Sure enough, even if he joined the disaster syndicate for the sake of battle, he still couldn't be bad after being raised by Azazel. However, talking to a child was already Wally's limit. It would be too difficult for him to give a child a happy life. In the end, Wally brought Orpheus out of calamity and brought him to Noah's side, right? In Wally's eyes, although you were a strong enemy that he had to overcome, it was also because of this that his recognition of you was higher than anyone else, right? That was what Azazel had said when he found out that Orpheus was brought out of calamity by Wally and brought to Noah's side. In addition, you also took good care of the Jumanli and Seedy families who were students. Obviously, you were very good at taking care of people. At that time, Orpheus was also very interested in you, so Wally chose to bring Orpheus to your side and let you take care of him. Wally should believe in you, Azazel said to Noah with certainty. He believes that you can take good care of Orpheus and give Orpheus the life he wants. For this reason, Wally was regarded as a traitor by the Disaster Syndicate and went against them. When he found out about this, Azazel's face was full of pride. He almost directly said, "How can he be a bad guy when he was brought up by me?" At that time, Noah really wanted to say to Azazel, "You are the governor of the fallen angels, the leader of the bad guys." In the end, in order to save Azazel some face, Noah didn't say it out loud. But from this, it could be seen how Orpheus was living in the Disaster Syndicate. Even Wally, the battle maniac, couldn't stand it and brought Orpheus out, resolutely betraying the Disaster Syndicate. One could imagine how lonely Orpheus was in the Disaster Syndicate. Now, living with Noah, Orpheus didn't look like anything on the surface, but she was actually very satisfied in her heart, right? Because of this, Orpheus didn't care about losing half of her power at all. She even directly gave up on the idea of defeating the real Red Dragon Emperor and gave up on her previous dreams. "I don't want to go back to the dimensional gap." At that time, Orpheus said this to Noah. "I want to be with Noah." Yes. To Orpheus, Noah's home was her home. Her home was no longer the dimensional gap that had nothing in the past. Under such circumstances, Orpheus welcomed another sister. She must be more satisfied in her heart, right? Therefore, Noah also gave up his previous plan. Orpheus and Lilith, both of them were indispensable. Even if they couldn't return to infinite, even if they were no longer invincible, it didn't matter. Because, no matter what kind of enemy appeared, these two children would be under his protection. That was enough. Just like this, Lilith also moved into Noah's apartment and lived with Orpheus and Noah. What was worth mentioning was that Aster and Athena no longer transformed into weapons like in the past. Instead, they came out to live with Orpheus and Lilith. This caused a very serious problem. Noah's apartment was too small. Even if other than Noah, the other four were all children, at least they looked like children, but in fact, other than Lilith who was just born not long ago, the other three had lived for God knows how long, for children and an adult were crowded enough. Therefore, a situation inevitably occurred. Should this be considered a benefit? Noah, who had just woken up in the morning, laid on the bed and looked at his surroundings, extremely speechless. He saw that Noah's bed was already crowded with people. Orpheus was lying on the left. Lilith was lying on the right. Aster was lying on the other side. And Noah was lying in the middle. His arms were tightly hugged by Orpheus and Lilith, while his neck was tightly hugged by Aster. That's fine. Noah couldn't help but complain. Sleeping is fine, but all of them are only wearing knee socks. What are they playing at? That's right. Not only Aster, but even Orpheus and Lilith were wearing knee socks. Except for knee socks, everything else was taken off. It was simply Aster's X3 state. Have they been led astray by Aster? Noah thought helplessly. Orpheus and Lilith were simply too pure and innocent, so they would learn everything. Not to mention Lilith, Orpheus often learned from Noah, and even learned from the behavior of the Jumanli's dependents. He seemed to be enjoying it. He probably learned this from Aster too, right? Of all things to learn, you have to learn this? Noah sighed. Noah gently broke away from Orpheus and Lilith's hugs, carried Aster in his arms, and carefully got up. At this moment, Noah noticed something strange. Looking at his arms that were tightly hugged by Orpheus and Lilith, Noah was startled at first, but soon after, he stood up in surprise. What is this? Chapter 1936. The morning sun shone in through the window and onto the bed in the room. The warm feeling made both Orpheus and Lilith look comfortable, and they hugged Noah even tighter. However, Noah's attention was no longer on Orpheus and Lilith, but on his own hands. Wisps of spiritual energy that were as faint as smoke drifted out of the bodies of the two dragon god girls, circled around them, and gradually entered Noah's body. As the wisps of spiritual energy entered, Noah could clearly feel it. He could feel the connection between Orpheus and Lilith. It was as if an invisible bridge had suddenly been built between Noah, Orpheus, and Lilith. Relying on this bridge, Noah could actually feel the hearts of Orpheus and Lilith. At this moment, Noah had a feeling. It was a feeling that he had grasped everything about Orpheus and Lilith. That feeling was as if it was telling Noah. No matter what Noah planned to let Orpheus and Lilith do, the two dragon god girls would no longer be able to resist, and would absolutely obey his orders. Noah was at a loss. What's going on? While Noah was at a loss, a voice suddenly sounded. Seems like you've picked up a huge bargain. The sudden voice made Noah react, and he turned his head and looked to the side. There, Athena sat up, looking as if she had just woken up, but her beautiful snake eyes were staring at the spiritual energy surrounding Noah's arm. Athena immediately said, "That's a contract." Contract? Noah was completely stunned. Of course, Noah was no stranger to contracts. Putting everything else aside, Aster and Athena were Noah's contracted elves. Letitia and Pest, who were still helping Noah solve his problems in the box garden world, were also contracted by Noah. The famous heroic spirit Medusa of the type moon world was also Noah's follower, and she still maintained a contract with Noah. So, how could Noah be unfamiliar with such a thing as a contract? But why did Orpheus and Lilith suddenly contract with him? Orpheus and Lilith probably didn't realize that they had formed a contract with you, right? Athena pondered for a while and gave this answer. These two children probably didn't want to leave you subconsciously and hoped to be with you forever, so they unconsciously formed a contract with you. Unconsciously? Noah felt the connection with Orpheus and Lilith in his body, and he was somewhat in disbelief. Are you for real? It was not that Noah was making a fuss about nothing, but until now, Noah had never encountered a contract that was formed without his consent and without him even noticing. Although Noah had many contracted partners, and all of them had great backgrounds, this was only because of Noah's luck. It was not a simple matter for others to form a contract with someone. Indeed, many people knew the skills to enslave their contracted partners. For example, in this world, there were many summoning magic, and even summoning magic that could summon all kinds of monsters and people. But summoning was one thing, and being able to enslave was another. Generally speaking, the more advanced the summoner's skills and methods were, the easier it would be to enslave the summoned creature. However, if a contract was formed, it was another matter. For example, Noah had met the summoner of the Devil Star spirit in the box garden, Luce. That guy's target of enslavement was much stronger than him. The star spirit of the demon star, Algor. That was an existence that even White Yiksha could not help but praise. As the strongest species of the boxers, it should have at least 3 digits of strength. However, because it had formed a contract with that good-for-nothing Luos, its strength had been greatly reduced. Not only was it dragged down to 5 digits, but even so, Luos had also imposed many restrictions on it in order to make it easier for it to be controlled, causing its strength to decrease by quite a bit. It was simply a reckless waste of a heavenly treasure. Therefore, the contract itself was a very important matter. Whether it could succeed, what kind of situation it would lead to after it succeeded, what would happen during the process of forming the contract, and so on, were all uncertain. In the box garden, one could still use the outcome of the bestowment game to force a contract, but in other worlds, without the coercion of the bestowment game, who would be willing to form a contract with a good-for-nothing? Even if it was not a good-for-nothing, who would be willing to form a contract with someone who was much weaker than them and work for them? Just like in the world of the shaped moon, most of the heroic spirits who had transformed into servants were very difficult to control because of this. For this reason, a command spell that could forcefully carry out a command once became very precious. Of course, apart from coercion, there were also examples of powerful contract targets who had formed contracts with existences who were much weaker than them. However, that was generally a contract of equivalent exchange, not a servant contract. When some of the contract targets hoped to get something from the contractor, they would also form an equal contract and perform paid services. In exchange for what they wanted, they would provide power to the contractor. Under such circumstances, logically speaking, if Orpheus and Lilith, who were both the most powerful dragons and the most powerful deities, wanted to form a contract with them, it would be a matter of whether they could succeed or not. However, Noah was completely unaware that Orpheus and Lilith had formed a contract unconsciously. "This only proves one thing," said Athena. "The contract that Orpheus and Lilith have formed with you is a servant contract. They won't charge you any price and will obey your orders. This kind of benefit that comes directly to your door can naturally be carried out spontaneously without the consent of the other party at all. Thugs that came to his door for free and would obey his orders obediently. Who wouldn't want such a good thing? Not to mention, Orpheus and Lilith were not ordinary thugs, but between 3 and 4 digits. If the two were combined, they could even become an infinite dragon god, an existence that could reach 3 digits. Such existences obeying orders without complaint was simply a pie that fell from the sky. And it was a huge pie. This kind of servant contract that did not have any disadvantages for the contractor could only be concluded by the party who was willing to be the servant. According to Athena, Orpheus and Lilith subconsciously did not want to leave Noah and wanted to be with him all the time. Therefore, they voluntarily formed this kind of contract and unknowingly became contract partners who would obey Noah's orders. In this way, unless Noah took the initiative to sever the contract or died, even Orpheus and Lilith would not be able to sever the contract. This kind of contract is even more restrictive than the one you had with the Holy Sword Spirit. It is comparable to the contract you made in the box, or even the one you had with me. Athena's seductive eyes turned to Noah. Although her tone was indifferent, there was a hint of emotion in it. As expected of the man who is favored by all the worlds. Has even God finally been attracted to you? After Aster, Athena, Letitia, Pest, and Medusa, Orpheus and Lilith had also become contract partners of Noah. In response, Noah could only bitterly laugh. He stretched out his hand and stroked Orpheus and Lilith's heads lovingly while smiling at Athena. If it was only about attracting God, would have attracted a certain goddess a long time ago, right? Athena raised her brows and looked at Noah's thought-provoking gaze. The corners of her mouth slowly curled up. That's why I said you are a man who is favored by the world, a lucky guy. After saying this, Athena turned into a burst of light particles and disappeared. Ugh. Aster, Orpheus, and Lilith continued to turn over and firmly stuck to Noah's body. Their exquisite faces that were usually expressionless were now filled with comfort and serenity. Noah could only smile helplessly, but did not get up again. He stroked the heads of the 3 petite girls in his arms and sat there quietly, waiting for them to wake up. I'll let these 3 girls continue sleeping for the time being. Just like that, the spiritual energy drifting from Orpheus and Lilith continued to enter Noah's body and did not subside for a long time. Chapter 1937. Concluded a contract with Orpheus and Lilith? In the reception room of an office building in Lilith, the capital of the underworld's demon king's territory, Asashel was completely speechless as he listened to the news that Noah had just brought. Concluded a contract with the infinite dragon god? Had this kind of thing happened before? No, right? Not to mention the almost invincible infinite dragon god, even those miscellaneous gods and other mythical forces did not have many who had signed a contract with humans, right? In the end, Noah had done it easily. Moreover, it was a servant contract without compensation. Good Lord, you've done something that has never been done before, and I'm afraid will never be replicated in the future. How did this world give birth to such a foul human like you? Asashel really felt all kinds of imbalance. Back then, in order to conclude a contract with one of the 5 dragon kings, the golden dragon god, Fafnir, not only did I use all kinds of connections, but I also found his whereabouts with great difficulty and finally concluded an equal contract with compensation. So far, I don't know how many legendary treasures I've spent. You, on the other hand, casually abducted a dragon god and lived with him for a period of time. You made him act cute all the time and even brought back another dragon god. In the end, you actually made him willingly give himself to you. Which great god's illegitimate child are you? One of the 5 dragon kings, the golden dragon god Fafnir. That was the famous dragon king in Norse mythology, famous for collecting treasures from all over the world. The legend that dragons like to collect treasures was mostly spread because of the actions of this dragon king. In order to be able to conclude a contract with Fafnir, Asashel had not only searched all over the world for this dragon king who flew everywhere and collected treasures from all over the world, but he also finally succeeded with all kinds of precious treasures as the price. One could imagine how difficult it was to conclude a contract with a powerful object. This was because Fafnir was famous for collecting treasures and had a weakness that could be found. Asashel used this point to bargain and finally succeeded in concluding a contract with a dragon king. Otherwise, even if I can find a dragon king, demon king, level contract partner, the difficulty of successfully forming a contract with him is definitely much higher than directly defeating him. Under such circumstances, Noah played with the 2 Lolas all day long and enjoyed himself immensely. In the end, the 2 dragon gods signed a contract with him. Not only was it free of charge, but it was also a servant contract that only obeyed his master's orders. How could Asashel feel balanced? In response, Noah merely rolled his eyes. Don't think I don't know. I've heard from Sazax that you're now eyeing Typhon, the king of monsters in Greece. You're planning to form a contract with him. Once you succeed, who would dare to mess with you in the future? The king of monsters in Greek mythology, Typhon. As mentioned before, this guy was the father of all kinds of famous demons. In terms of fame and strength, he was not below Fenrir before he lost his power. If it wasn't for the sudden appearance of Noah, then the person who replaced the declining Fenrir to enter the top 10 of the world would be Typhon. If Asashel could really form a contract with Typhon, it would be equivalent to getting a top 10 fighter in the world. Therefore, Asashel was just the pot calling the kettle black. Just as Noah was thinking about it, Asashel yelled out, "What are you doing? You also said that it would only count if the contract was successfully formed. If it was so easy to form a contract with Typhon, Zeus wouldn't have had his hands and feet broken by Typhon. Even if it was successful, I don't know what kind of price I would have to pay. If the other party pays with my life and even soul, even if it was successful, would I dare to form a contract with him?" That was true. Typhon's fame and strength were well known, but just like Fenrir, Typhon was also a fierce creature in his own mythology. He was not a kind person. For such a fierce creature, even if it could form a contract, the price to pay would definitely be a frightening level. It's because of this that the contract is difficult. Asashel sighed in all kinds of ways. Besides, Typhon can't be compared to Orpheus and Lilith. The more he said, the more Asashel felt unconvinced. It's already very surprising that Wally could subdue Fenrir, but that was also at the cost of a substantial reduction in Fenrir's power. Even so, he only let Fenrir be a member of the team, not a contract object. Asashel looked at Noah. "I'm starting to wonder, how did you manage to abduct those 2 dragon gods? Can you not talk about abduction every time you open your mouth? It feels very evil coming out of your mouth." Noah said angrily. Besides, Orpheus and Lilith also formed a contract unconsciously and spontaneously. They had never thought of forming a contract with me before. Even so, didn't you still succeed in getting those 2 dragon gods in the end? Asashel curled his lips. Don't take it for granted. You. Noah was speechless. I'm not going to talk nonsense with you. I'm here to ask you for a favor. With that said, Noah took out his gift card and handed it to Asashel. What's this? Asashel's attention was immediately drawn to the gift card. He took it curiously and flipped through it. I feel a wonderful power fluctuation. It shouldn't be an ordinary card, right? This card can be used to store a lot of things. Not only can it store food, water, and clothes, but it can also be used to store weapons, props, and other things that can exert power, Noah explained. In addition, it can also allow contract creatures to reside in it. So convenient? Asashel raised his eyebrows and became more interested in the gift card. It's quite an interesting prop. Why don't you let me study it? You can study it if you want. Noah shrugged. But before that, you have to help me see if there's any way to modify this card and make the space inside suitable for contract creatures to live in. Store food, water, and clothes. That was not the main purpose of the gift card. The main purpose of the gift card was to store gifts. After becoming Noah's contract creatures, Orpheus and Lilith were also considered Noah's gifts and could be stored in the gift card. However, Aster and Athena said that the gift card wasn't suitable for people to live in. If Aster and Athena were to stay in the gift card, they would choose to go into hibernation. They would only wake up when Noah called for them or when they sensed that Noah was in trouble. After forming a contract with Orpheus and Lilith, Noah made a decision. In the future, he would bring Orpheus and Lilith with him. Even if he went to other worlds. After all, Orpheus and Lilith were different from Letitia and Pest. There was nothing for them to do in this world. In addition to their purity, Noah really couldn't bear to leave the two dragon god girls behind. Noah really couldn't bear to leave them behind. However, although it wasn't difficult to bring Orpheus and Lilith along, it was difficult to bring two astonishingly pure little girls around the world. At this time, Noah thought of the gift card. It wasn't easy for Orpheus and Lilith to live a decent life. If I bring them along, I can't let the two children stay in a world with nothing and sleep alone all day long, right? Noah said. So, I want to ask you if there's a way to modify the gift card to make the environment inside more comfortable and easier to live in. In this way, Aster, Athena, Orpheus, and Lilith could live a comfortable life in the gift card that was no different from the apartment. For this purpose, Noah specially went to the underworld to look for Asashel and asked this guy who could even create artificial artifacts to help him. If that's the case, it's not difficult. The demon realm originally had the technology to create an alternate space. Using that technology to modify your card, the success rate isn't low, Asashel said doubtfully. But, why do you have to go through so much trouble to bring a contract partner with you? Can't you summon a contract partner at any time by learning summoning magic or something like that? In other worlds, how could the summoning be successful? Don't worry about it, just do as I say. Noah sighed. By the way, why do you suddenly want to form a contract with Typhon? With that, Asashel's casual expression began to turn serious. Chapter 1938. He slowly placed the gift card on the table beside him, picked up a cup of coffee on the table, and took a sip before speaking again. I have a hunch that there will definitely be a bigger and more dangerous disaster than before. For that time, I must prepare in advance and get enough combat power to deal with any situation. For this reason, I intend to sign a contract with Typhon. Asasher's words caused Noah's eyes to flicker slightly, and he replied indifferently, "That's right." Because of Lezawim? That's right, Asashel affirmed. Although that guy is a bastard, his evil intentions are far thicker than anyone else's. He's basically the most typical type of antagonist. Someone like him definitely wouldn't obtain the Holy Grail just to revive the evil dragon and increase his combat strength. Asashel had said the same thing before. However, Noah didn't expect Asashel to be so serious in preparing a countermeasure. Forming a contract with Typhon was just a preparation for me. If Lezavim really leads the evil dragon army to attack us, Fafnir and I might not be enough. Asashel knocked on the table. Apart from me, I've also informed Sazax, Michael, and the rest of the mythical forces to prepare for the upcoming war. Are you ready for this? Noah frowned. Could it be that you're just worrying too much? Maybe it's because of that, Asashel said nonchalantly. However, there's nothing wrong with being careful. Now that the various factions have reached an agreement and achieved peace, all that's left is to remove the thorn in our side, the calamity. Under such a beautiful situation, I definitely can't let that bastard Lai Lin destroy the peace we've worked so hard to achieve. Asashal's eyes burned with fighting spirit as he spoke. That wasn't battle intent, but a sense of mission. The fallen angel governor, who wanted to see peace more than anyone else, would definitely not watch the upcoming peace be destroyed by a bastard like Lezivim. In fact, Sazix and Michael, who have dealt with Lezivim before, have also taken it seriously. They agreed with my point of view and began to make preparations. Asashal sighed. Although the rest of the mythical forces are also paying attention to the resurrection of the evil dragons, they don't think that Lezivim, the son of the Demon King, can do anything. They don't know that the evil dragons are only a threat. Lezivim is the real threat. Seeing that Athashel kept mentioning Lezivim's threat, Noah asked in confusion. I know that Lezwium is a bastard, but is he bad enough to make you so vigilant? You've only met him once, so of course you don't know how much of a bastard he is, Asashal said. Do you know why Wally hates Lezwium so much that he even wants to kill him? I'm not sure. Noah shook his head. However, Wally did say that Lezivim doesn't deserve the name of Lucifer. That's true. Asashal agreed with Wally's evaluation. All of that guy's behavior is just for his own enjoyment. He'll be happy when he sees others in pain, happy when he sees others in despair, happy when he sees others in tears and despair. It's as if he's the crystallization of malice and can't be called the Demon King. Or, in the eyes of others, the Demon King was just like what Asashal said, a bad guy. But if there was only evil without honor and dignity, how could he be called a king? And that guy Lezivim has nothing to do with honor and dignity. Asashal snorted coldly. The reason why Wally hates him so much is that he once instigated his son to abuse Wally. Noah was stunned. Since Lezivim was Wally's grandfather, he was naturally the father of Wally's father. Instigated his son to abuse Wally? Noah was stunned. Doesn't that mean that Lezivim let Wally's father abuse his son? That's right. Asashal's eyes flashed with unhappiness. In Lezivim's heart, son and grandson are not worth mentioning at all. They are all props for his enjoyment. He sincerely enjoys his son abusing his grandson and takes pleasure in it. Don't you think such a guy is a bastard? Not to mention the demon world that was currently changing, the demons who inherited the ancient Demon King's bloodline were definitely not good people. Take Wally's father, Lezivim's son, for example. He was a typical demon. Not only did his son inherit the noble Lucifer bloodline, but he was also the White Dragon Emperor. His potential was limitless and was destined to stand out at the top of the world in the future. As the father of such a gifted kid, Wally's father didn't feel happy or proud at all. He only felt that his status was threatened and that he would be surpassed by his son in the future and be fiercely suppressed by his son. A demon simply couldn't stand such a thing. Even if the target was his son, it was the same. Therefore, that person was afraid of his own son, Wally. He was always worried that his son would surpass him in the future, suppress him, or even kill him. In the eyes of an evil person, everything in this world was malicious. Under such circumstances, Lezivim instigated his son to abuse Wally and didn't let his son kill Wally, enjoying the process. The more Asashal spoke, the more unhappy he felt. In the end, Wally escaped and came to me. Since childhood, he held hatred and killing intent towards Lezivim and grew up at an astonishing speed. He didn't expect Wally to have such a past. Perhaps, this was the reason why Wally pursued power. Without power, you will only be controlled by others. Only with power can you control your own life and even the lives of others. Wally grew up under such a belief. Asashal sighed. Fortunately, Wally didn't become a captive of power. Although he pursued power, he wasn't blind. It was because of this that Wally was able to develop Tyrannosaurus, right? Otherwise, he would have been immersed in the power of Tyrannosaurus and disregarded his own safety. Although it was simple, Noah could imagine how much effort Asashal had put in to prevent Wally from becoming a captive of power. The reason why Wally could become the White Dragon Emperor with a bright future was definitely due to Asashal's education and influence. At this time, Asashal said this again. Later, I received news that because Wally escaped, Lesavim, who could no longer enjoy the joy of his son and grandson, killed his own son, who was Wally's father. Noah's expression turned cold. Now you know how much of a bastard that guy is, right? Asashel laughed coldly. Since such a bastard has appeared again, he definitely won't stop until he turns the entire world upside down. Not to mention, he still has the Holy Grail and the evil dragon in his hands. That's why I have to be on guard, Asashel reminded. Haven't you noticed that Wally and his teammates have disappeared recently? After Asashel's words, Noah realized what Asashel meant. Indeed, he hadn't heard any news about Wally's team recently. They went to search for traces of the disaster squad. Asashel revealed the puzzle. No one wants to defeat Lesavim more than Wally. I think, with Wally's dedication to Lesavim, he will definitely be able to find that guy before Lesavim does the worst thing, right? But, won't that be a problem? Noah asked. Even if he finds Lesavim's location, if Wally loses his mind and rushes in, he might get hurt instead, right? Don't worry, Wally isn't that irrational. Once he finds Lesavim's whereabouts, he will definitely report it to me, Asashel said mysteriously. Moreover, recently, Wally's development of the divine artifact has reached another level. Thinking about it, even if he faces Lesavim's divine artifact nullification, he should have the possibility of winning, right? This news made Noah couldn't help but raise his eyebrows as he muttered to himself. It seemed that Wally's pursuit of Arubian's ability was successful. He just didn't know what kind of ability it would be. Noah began to look forward to it. Chapter 1939. After giving the gift card to Asashel for modification, Asashel directly told Noah that he would come back to collect it in a few days. With the technology used by the demon realm to construct alternate spaces, modifying the environment of the gift card was not a difficult task. The reason why he needed a few days was because Asashel wanted to study Noah's gift card. In fact, the use of the gift card was not something rare to the existence of the mystical side of this world. After all, in this world, many mystical magic and spells could open the entrance to alternate spaces and use them as storage spaces. In terms of convenience, it was almost comparable to the gift card. For example, Genova, Irina, and Yuda usually stored their weapons in the alternate spaces and would only take them out during battle. Even Genova, Irina, and Yuda used this method to store items, let alone others. However, not everything could be stored in this alternate space. Because it existed between the real world and the dimensional gap, the alternate spaces had harsh environments that outsiders could not imagine. Basically, it could not store living things, food, water, and daily necessities. It could only be used to store unconventional props and items. Therefore, the alternate spaces were used to store powerful weapons, rare props, and legendary items that were not usually used. No one had ever used it to store daily necessities. It was also because of this that when they went to the vampire's territory the last time, the Jamanli's family had to bring their own luggage. Asashel said that Noah's gift card was convenient because of its wide range of storage. If possible, Asashel probably wanted to develop something similar to the gift card that could be used to store daily necessities like food, water, and clothes. This function was not to be underestimated. In the box court, the reason why the gift card had such convenience was to deal with the Demon King's attack. The Demon King's gift game was compulsory and did not require the consent of the participants. Therefore, sometimes, there were situations that required a long period of war. Under such circumstances, could one still count on the Demon King to provide them with food and water? That was naturally impossible. Therefore, the gift card had such a high status in the box court. It could be used to store gifts as well as food, water, and clothes to ensure long-term combat ability. When Asashel realized this benefit, he decided to research it. Arthashel must have wanted to use the gift card in the war before Lesavim started a large-scale battle, right? He just didn't know if he could make it in time. No matter what, Asashel was willing to help Noah, so Noah was relieved. However, as soon as Noah left Athashel's place and was about to return to the human world, Sazak suddenly jumped out of a teleportation portal. Sazax noticed Noah and smiled. He raised his hand and greeted him like an old friend instead of a demon king. Yo, Noah. Looking for a satchel? It had to be said that Sazax's hearty greeting was indeed very approachable. However, that was not the demeanor of a demon king at all. Noah turned his head and looked in Sazax's direction. Apart from Sazax, there was another person behind him. It was a tall woman with silver hair, but she was wearing a maid's uniform and exuded an awe-inspiring aura. Noah knew this person. She was Sazax's queen and the current demon king Lucifer's kin. At the same time, she was also recognized as the strongest queen in the underworld Gulifia. Back then, Noah had met Gulifia during the marriage between Riaz and Rizel. Therefore, Noah knew about her. Although she was wearing a maid's uniform and was the head maid of the Gimli family, Gulifia was Sazax's wife. Moreover, she was quite strong. Noah had heard that Gulifia had once competed with Leviathan, Seraph, one of the 4 demon kings, for the title of the strongest female demon in the underworld. In other words, Gulifia could compete with Leviathan, the demon king Seraph. Her strength was definitely on the level of a demon king. Noah hadn't seen Gulifia for a long time. As soon as Noah saw Gulifia, he immediately had a strange feeling. His eyes were fixed on Gulifia, and he didn't shift his gaze away. Both Sazax and Gulifia were stunned by this. Lord Noah. Gulifia frowned subtly, as if she found it unnatural. Excuse me, did I do something rude? I say, Noah, don't tell me you've taken a liking to Gulifia? Sazax was even more whimsical. His expression was a little strange, and then he became excited. No. Gulifia can't. Gulifia can't. Lord Sazax. Gulifia's furrowed brows relaxed, and she spoke helplessly and sternly. Please don't say such strange things. That's not what a demon king Lucifer should do. But. Sazax was a little conflicted. Noah is my good friend and Laia's fiancé. You're my wife. If Noah takes a liking to you, I'll be very troubled. His wife being taken a liking to another man, and that man was his good friend and sister's fiancé. That's just a little troubling. If it was another man, it was possible that they would break off all relations, right? Lord Sazax. Gulifia was about to teach him a lesson. However, Noah suddenly spoke at that moment. Gulifia, if I remember correctly, your surname is Lucifergus, right? Noah's sudden question stunned both Sazax and Gulifia once more. However, Gulifia quickly reacted. Although she was puzzled as to why Noah would ask such a question, she answered honestly. Yes, my full name is Gulifia Lucifergus. Noah's eyes suddenly flickered. Lucifergus. That surname was quite famous in the demonic world. It wasn't because it was the surname of the most powerful queen, but because it was a famous pure-blooded demonic family. Lucifergus wasn't one of the 72-pillar demonic families, but a famous demonic family outside of the 72-pillar demonic families. This family had served the demon king Lucifer for generations, and they were famous for it. However, Gulifia was the only one left in the family. This was because the one it served was not the current demon king Lucifer, but the previous demon king Lucifer. In other words, Lucifergus was a pure-blooded demonic family of the former demon king. When the 4 demon kings were all dead and the demonic world entered a period of reformation, Gulifia, as a member of the former demon king's faction, fought against the faction that wanted to bring in the current demon king. It was then that Gulifia and Seraph fought for the title of the most powerful female demon. In the end, Gulifia met and fell in love with Sazax, the hero of the reformist faction who displayed his prowess on the front lines. The two of them passed countless trials and finally got together, becoming a legend in the underworld. Noah had heard Leah's mention that before, but he forgot about it. Now, Noah narrowed his eyes at Gulifia's eye-catching silver hair, as well as the fact that she vaguely resembled a certain person in his memory, as well as the surname she used when she reported her name. Gulifia, are you really the only one left in your family? Why do you ask? Gulifia's face was calm, but her eyes became serious. The Lucifergus family was a faction that supported the former Demon King. They were all wiped out, and I was the only one who chose to join the Demon King's faction and serve the current Demon King Lucifer. That's how I survived. It's no secret in the underworld. Yes, it's no secret in the underworld. Noah smiled bitterly. But the situation might be a little troublesome. Gulifia was puzzled. Sazix, on the other hand, seemed to have noticed something. He looked at Noah with a serious expression. Tell me about it. Chapter 1940. No one knew what Noah talked about with Sazax and Gulifia after that. However, a passing demon noticed that after Noah left, Sazax's expression was a little heavy, and he looked at Gulifia with a little worry in his eyes. Gulifia, who had always been strict, was at a loss, which was rare. After that, some observant people found out. Sazax and Gulifia were making a lot of preparations. What were they preparing for? They were preparing to go to war with the Disaster Squad. Previously, Azazel had mentioned that the Disaster Squad would definitely cause a huge disaster under the leadership of Lezavim. For this reason, Sazax, who had dealt with Lezavim for a long time, attached great importance to it and had been preparing for war with the Disaster Squad. Now, this kind of preparation was even more serious. It was so serious that Sazax called all his family members back, as if he was planning to have a final battle with a certain mythical force, which made many people secretly start to worry. As for Noah, he had returned to the human world and lived the same daily life as before. Everything seemed so calm, but there were undercurrents surging. Therefore, almost everyone had the same thought. This was the calm before the storm. Even if it looked calm on the surface, this calm gave people a kind of pressure, as if it could collapse at any time, making people's hearts heavy. Under the influence of this atmosphere, not to mention the human world, all the mythical forces that had reached a peace agreement began to be very vigilant and strengthened their defenses, ready to deal with a sudden war at any time. However, even so, what should have happened still happened. A few days later, Noah received the modified gift card. But the next day, Azazel jumped directly to Noah's apartment through the teleportation magic circle, bringing unimaginable bad news. What? Noah exclaimed in shock. Both heaven and the underworld were attacked? That's right. Azazel's expression was also extremely ugly. Last night, the heaven realm and the underworld were attacked at the same time. The casualties have not been calculated yet, but the losses are very heavy. The heaven realm was captured in the first 5 days, and the underworld's Demon King territory was destroyed and turned into ruins. This was indeed a disastrous loss. The heavenly realm was divided into 7 levels, and each level was measured in terms of Tion. It was said that the God of the Holy Bible once lived in the 7th heaven, the highest level in the heaven realm. After the God of the Holy Bible passed away, only the system in charge of the divine equipment and blessing remained. No one lived there. The blazing angels led by Michael lived on the 6th day and guarded the only way to the 7th day. They had always been managing the operation of the heaven realm and the system, minimizing the impact of the death of God. In the end, other than the 6th and 7th days guarded by the blazing angel, the other 5 days had all fallen. Wasn't that a heavy loss? As for the underworld's Demon King territory, it was the territory of the 4 Demon Kings. It was the center of the entire demon world. The Demon King territory had been turned into ruins. Most likely, the entire demon world was in complete chaos right now. Fortunately, Sazax and Michael had always been preparing for war. Even if the attack was too sudden, they still repelled the enemy. Asashel knocked on the table hatefully. On the other hand, the fallen angels were not attacked at all. We didn't even receive any news when the attack started. By the time I found out, the attacks of heaven and the underworld had already ended. The first 5 days and the Demon King territory were destroyed. Damn it. Asashel's frustration was not without reason. In fact, even Noah's brows were tightly knitted together. If they could contact Noah, Sazax and Michael would definitely ask Noah for help, right? At the very least, Sazax and Michael would ask Asashel for help and let the fallen angel camp go over. However, there was not a single bit of news about such a huge attack, causing both heaven and the underworld to suffer heavy casualties. That must be Az Dahaka's doing, Asashel said regretfully. With that evil dragon's ability, there are many ways to prevent heaven and the underworld from contacting each other. Even the fallen angels who live on the other side of the underworld did not receive any news. Naturally, the other forces did not receive any news at all. The three-headed demon dragon of the fire worship sect was famous for controlling thousands of spells. In the box court, due to the box court's unique rules of bestowment games and the fact that it had become the final trial for humans, it had surpassed the original mythical order. Azidakaha's thousands of spells had become a form of bestowment. It was a gift that upheld the belief that all technology and concepts in the world could not be without a trace of malice. As the absolute evil that carried all malice in the world, it could allow the three-headed demon dragon to unconditionally obtain all knowledge related to the game. In this world, the three-headed demon dragon that had not transcended its own mythical relationship displayed magical abilities that were consistent with the mythical relationship. With its terrifying magical attainments, it was easy for it to prevent the activation of the communication magic formation and make it impossible for anyone to detect the attack. However, it also depended on the situation. To be able to completely conceal the movements of such a large-scale attack on heaven and the underworld, even the fallen angels who also lived in the underworld, showed how terrifying Az Dahaka's ability was. Asashel took a deep breath and suppressed the anger and unwillingness in his heart as he looked at Noah. Now, Jamonli's and Sidi's families have returned to the underworld to help clean up the mess. However, the heavy casualties of the demons and angels have also alerted all the forces that the disaster team is no longer the same as before. With the support of several famous legendary evil dragons, it definitely has the ability to single-handedly defeat a force. So, in order to avoid being defeated one by one, it's time for all of you to take action. Noah continued Asashel's words. Based on your style, you should have begun to gather the main gods of the various mythical forces and prepare to gather together to formulate a battle strategy, right? After all, I don't have a good temper to not fight back after being beaten. Asashel looked at Noah closely. For this, I also want to ask you to take action. Your power is too important to us. As long as you are around, at least we will have confidence. All the mythical forces have gathered together, but they don't have confidence in the end? Noah laughed. If this were to spread, it would definitely be a joke, right? This also proves that the enemy is so difficult to deal with. Asashel laughed bitterly. And if we can have the power of a god slayer that is absolutely invincible, I think no matter who it is, they will have confidence, right? With that said, Asashel glanced to the side. Moreover, you still have those two treasures. They are incredible combat power. In Asashel's field of vision, Orpheus and Lilith were like twin sisters, sitting there and nibbling on snacks. Sensing Asashel's gaze, Orpheus looked up. Athashel, Orpheus said in a concise manner. Do you want me to help you? Yes. Asashel nodded very straightforwardly. We need your power. But, I am no longer infinite. Orpheus shook his head, reached out his hand, and touched Lilith's head beside him. We will no longer be infinite. Even if you are not infinite, you are still the dragon gods. Asashel's expression became serious. Even if you are not invincible, you are still the strongest. At least, no one will doubt this. Orpheus pondered for a moment before saying, that's right. If Noah goes, then I will go. Just as Orpheus expressed his stance, Lilith also tilted her head and said so. Same for Lilith. Looking at the two most powerful dragon gods, Asashel felt a sense of helplessness in his heart. In the past, the extraordinary dragon god who did not intervene in the affairs of the world and had been quietly watching the development of the world and never intervening was no longer there. Whether it was Orpheus or Lilith, now, they only belonged to one person. They belonged to Noah alone. In this regard, Asashel only sighed and did not find it strange. Because this person who had Orpheus and Lilith was even more against the rules than the infinite dragon god who was once invincible in the world. Under Asashal's gaze, Noah closed his eyes and stood up after a while. Let's go. Chapter 1941. Just like the last time, the representatives of the major mythical organizations would gather in the underworld to discuss the matter of Lezivim and the evil dragon army. Last time, the main gods of the various mythical organizations did not come in person because they were worried that the existence of the god Slayer would attack them. Apart from Northern Europe, Greece, India, and Mount Meru, the other mythical organizations only sent representatives. This time, the various mythological forces had already reached an agreement, and with the god Slayer himself as a deterrent, no one was worried that they would be put in a disadvantageous position. All the main gods of the mythological forces had come personally and gathered in the underworld. However, the underworld demon king's territory had been destroyed and turned into ruins. The major mythical organizations naturally could not gather there for a meeting. Therefore, this meeting was decided to be held in the Gimli territory, which had a good relationship with the god Slayer. The Gimli family would personally provide the venue and be responsible for the reception. When Noah brought Orpheus and Lilith here, Asashal did not let him go directly to the meeting place. Instead, he brought him into a private room. Here, the 4 demon kings, Sazax, Achuka, Seraphil, and Felubium, gathered together and sat around a table, seemingly discussing something. Noah immediately attracted everyone's attention as soon as he entered. Little Noah is here? Seraphil waved at Noah enthusiastically. Long time no see. Long time no see, Noah. Achuka also greeted him with a smile on her coquettish face. Although we were also present at the last meeting of the major organizations, it became your home ground. We didn't even have the chance to greet you properly. Since then, my workload has increased. Felubium seemed to be in low spirits. Fortunately, I still have reliable dependents. Otherwise, if I continue to work like this, I will definitely die. However, Asashal is the busiest one. We are only in charge of the aftermath. He went to the various mythical organizations to discuss the peace process, Sazax said with a smile. Therefore, the biggest contributor should be Asashal. I'm just in charge of the labor. The one with the biggest contribution is here. Asashal patted Noah's shoulder. Without Noah, the negotiation wouldn't have gone so smoothly. If that was the case, we would have suffered unimaginable hardships. Now, we can be considered very lucky to be able to solve the problem just by running around. That's right, that's right. The 4 demon kings immediately nodded. Noah is the one with the greatest contribution. Looking at the 4 demon kings who were more perfunctory than flattering him, Noah smiled bitterly in his heart. Undoubtedly, these 4 fellows were all demon kings, but they were still as carefree and merry as before. Others didn't even know how to ridicule them. However, Noah was sharp enough to notice it. Whether it was Sazax, Achuka, Seraphil, or Felubium, there was a faint trace of darkness in their eyes. It was an expression of anger and unwillingness to accept the fact that the demon lord territory had been completely destroyed. Under such circumstances, Noah was not fooled by the superficial skills of the 4 demon kings, and went straight to the point. Looking at you guys, your losses are really heavy. The smiles on the faces of the 4 demon kings immediately faded little by little. The losses are indeed heavy, Sazax said as calmly as he could. Not only did the demon lord territory turn into ruins, but the demons who went to the front line also suffered heavy casualties. It's a serious loss for the entire demon realm. However, fortunately, our previous preparations were not in vain. At least we reacted in time when the attack began, and allowed the ordinary residents to take refuge and evacuate. Achuka sighed. Otherwise, I'm afraid even the ordinary residents would have suffered, right? Now, the residents of the demon lord territory have been scattered to the territories of various pure-blooded demon families for temporary shelter. Felubium's voice was still as weak as ever. The land of the underworld is big enough, so there's no need to worry about this. The problem is that if such an attack happens again, we may really have no way to deal with it. How can the mass of calamity be so evil? Tears welled up in Seraphal's eyes. Undoubtedly, no one has done anything bad, but they still have to suffer such a disaster. The atmosphere began to become a little heavy. Obviously, the destruction of the Demon Lord territory had not only caused the demon realm to become chaotic, but it had also affected many people. Although Sazax, Achuka, Seraphal, and Felubium had different reactions, they were still brooding over the mass of calamity's attack. Currently, we're doing our best to analyze the tactic that Az Dahaka used on the day of the attack to cut off the communication between the various forces and conceal the movement of the attack. Achuka unfolded an intricate magic array in her hands, and all kinds of mysterious characters jumped on it like data. I believe that it won't be long before this tactic is completely analyzed, and this kind of thing won't be allowed to happen a second time. However, Az Dahaka is the legendary evil dragon who has mastered thousands of types of magic. No one can be sure that he doesn't have a second similar tactic. Felubium continued Achuka's words. So, while Achuka is responsible for the technical analysis, we're also building a new communication tactic. Once it's successful, even if Az Dahaka uses a similar tactic, it won't work. Felubium's words made Azathiel breathe a sigh of relief. Felubium always looked like she was afraid of trouble and was weak, but this demon lord was an expert in military matters. The demon lord's contribution in successfully repelling the mass of calamity was probably the greatest. The 4 demon lords all had their own areas of expertise. Achuka was technical. Seraphal was diplomatic. Felubium was military. Sazax, on the other hand, was in charge of all miscellaneous matters other than technology, diplomacy, and military affairs. Therefore, in the past, when discussing important matters, Noah would talk to Sazax face to face instead of the other demon kings. Since Felubium said so, there should be no problem with this new communication method. After all, being able to maintain communication would give them the most advantageous situation on the battlefield. As a military expert, Felubium knew this best and would definitely be able to make perfect preparations. So, who are the attackers? Noah looked at the 4 demon lords. The heavens and the underworld were attacked at the same time. This proves that the mass of calamity has split into 2, right? The 4 demon lords immediately looked at each other. The ones who attacked the underworld were the evil dragon army led by Az Dahaka, Glendale, and Nidhogg. Sazax answered Noah's question. The ones who attacked the heavens were the evil dragon army led by Apophis and Radon. The evil dragon army? Azathiel's expression was somewhat unpleasant. That bastard Lai Lin, did he abuse the power of the Holy Grail and transform a large number of evil dragons? And forget about those evil dragon minions, the 3-headed evil dragon, the violent evil dragon, and the gluttonous evil dragon can continue to revive even if they are defeated. Seraphal said angrily. Especially that gluttonous evil dragon. It said something about my soft skin and tender flesh must be delicious. It kept drooling and trying to get close to me, but I can't kill it. It's so infuriating. Didn't I also get targeted by that violent evil dragon? Felubium said with a sigh. As soon as it heard that I was a demon lord, that evil dragon called Glendale kept rushing towards me. Even when it was attacked by my kin, it still rushed towards me as if nothing had happened. It's really unflattering. What about Az Dahaka? Noah asked the question he was most concerned about. Who's dealing with Az Dahaka? Both Sazax and Achuka looked over at the same time. It can't be. Azathiel was shocked. The 2 of you are attacking together? Sazax and Achuka were surpassers who could be ranked among the top 10 in the world. If one were to look at the dragon's level, they would be at least 2 heavenly dragon levels. Sazax and Achuka actually attacked together to deal with Az Dahaka? We didn't use our full strength. Achuka shook her head. But, we can also feel that Az Dahaka didn't use his full strength either. I heard that the clone Kyuvak who is as famous as Az Dahaka seems to have reached the heavenly dragon level, right? Sazak's expression became serious. Perhaps, that new moon dark dragon isn't the only evil dragon that has reached the heavenly dragon level. Azathiel held his breath. As for Noah, his eyes flickered, and he fell into deep thought. Dahaka. Not only did it block the movements of the heavenly realm and the underworld, it even forced Sazak and Achuka to attack. Even if the three parties didn't use their full strength, it was already shocking enough. Although it couldn't be compared to absolute evil in the box court, this mystic dragon wasn't someone to be trifled with either. No matter what, you've all worked very hard, Noah said suddenly. We'll talk about the rest at the meeting. Sazak, Achuka, Seraphil, and Felubium all nodded heavily. All right, the meeting should begin. Azathiel clapped his hands as if he wanted to wave away the heavy atmosphere. Let's go. This time, Noah nodded and walked to the meeting place with Sazak, Achuka, Seraphil, Felubium, and Azathiel. Chapter 1942. The venue provided by the Gimli family was a palace. It was a palace that was usually used for important balls and banquets. On this day, this palace had become the meeting place for various mythological forces. An endless stream of gods and representatives from various forces entered the hall. At this moment, in the incomparably vast palace, a huge round table sat there. The round table was extremely large. Even if every seat was separated by 1 or 2 meters, there were still hundreds of seats. Those who could sit were all the main gods of the largest mythological forces. Among them, the 4 main gods, Odin, Zeus, Shiva, and Sakra, were also present. Just like in the previous meeting, they all sat in the seats closest to the main seat. The difference from the previous meeting was in the Greek mythology. This time, Zeus still had Poseidon beside him, but Hades was not there. Moreover, even Poseidon did not take a seat. He just stood beside Zeus like a guard. The main gods of the other mythological forces were all present. They were all discussing the attack on heaven and the underworld. Among them, keywords such as evil dragon, holy grail, and son of the demon king could be faintly heard. This proved that all the forces attached great importance to this matter. It seemed that all the mythological forces were aware of the threat. Powerful evil dragons appeared one after another. A divine tool that could subvert the principles of life. The culprit who controlled all of this. When these factors were combined, even the demons and angels who had long been prepared for war suffered an unimaginable disaster. If the other mythological forces were attacked in the same way, in a situation where they were isolated and without help, they would probably suffer heavy casualties, right? Therefore, the gods had no choice but to be alert. There were many more gods participating in this meeting than the previous one. Coupled with such a discussion, the entire hall was extremely noisy. Until a certain moment, a god suddenly spoke. They're here. As soon as the voice fell, the entire hall was silent. All the gods turned their eyes to the direction of the door, causing a huge pressure to fill the surroundings. Under such circumstances, Noah brought Orpheus and Lilith and arrived late. Behind him, Sazak, Achuka, Seraphil, Felubium, and Asashel walked in as if they were his entourage. Under the silent pressure, almost all the gods cast their gazes on Noah at the first moment and started whispering to each other. Is that the god slayer? He was the one who easily defeated the 3 main gods of Greece, right? I can faintly sense the fluctuations of a dragon, as well as a sense of oppression. It seems that he is indeed not a simple character. As they had not come personally the last time, many of the main gods of the mythical organizations had not seen Noah before. Now that they had seen the legendary Godslayer with their own eyes, all the overgods present paid special attention to him. They constantly studied Noah. However, when they saw Orpheus and Lilith next to Noah, all the overgods were slightly stunned, and they all shut their mouths. Only Sakra looked at Orpheus and Lilith, who were obediently following behind Noah, and curled his lips into a smile. Just as the rumors say, the infinite dragon god has been split into 2, and it has yet to reunite as one. What a waste. The originally invincible dragon god has become like this. It really makes one unable to laugh even if one wanted to. Just like before, Sakura's words were so nasty that one could not help but feel angry. However, Asashel also said that the more important a person was to Sakura, the worse Sakura's attitude would be. Now, Sakura had said such nasty words to Orpheus and Lilith. It meant that Orpheus and Lilith were still highly valued in Sakura's heart, right? However, this time, Shiva also looked at Orpheus and suddenly smiled. Orpheus, it has been a long time since we last met, right? Orpheus raised his eyes and looked at Shiva, but he did not have any reaction. He only spoke faintly. Long time no see. Yes, I still remember the first time we met, Shiva said with a nostalgic tone. The feeling you gave me was endless and mysterious. You were like a black hole. You could die if you touched it. There was no limit. Looking at you like that, I felt powerless. You, the infinite dragon god, the true red dragon god emperor, and the god slayer can also be counted as one who can make me feel powerless. Saying that, Shiva shook his head in pity. It's a pity. Although you're still powerful, you're no longer as suffocating as before. Since your other half is by your side, why don't you return to being limitless, to being invincible? Hearing that, Orpheus fell silent. At this time, Lilith raised her head and looked at Shiva. She said, "Don't worry, Shiva. You are not Lilith's match." This sentence made Shiva choke. Yes. Even if his power had greatly decreased, Shiva was still not Orpheus and Lilith's match. Since Shiva, who used to be ranked second, was not Orpheus and Lilith's match, then no one else could beat Orpheus and Lilith. Was Lilith indirectly saying that even if they did not return to being one, the dragon god was still undefeatable? As expected of the once invincible existence. Sakura laughed mockingly. You are more arrogant than before. Arrogant? Lilith immediately tilted her head. She almost had a question mark printed on her forehead. Her face was full of confusion. Lilith. Arrogant? Just as Lilith was confused, Orpheus reached out his hand and stroked Lilith's head as usual, making Lilith reveal a comfortable expression. Seeing that, Noah could not help but laugh. Although he knew that it was not the time to laugh, Noah still could not help but want to laugh. Lilith must have thought that Orpheus was bullied by Shiva and wanted to stand up for Orpheus. That was why she said that, right? In the end, Lord Dragon God's pure and innocent thoughts were mistaken by Shiva and Sakura as Lilith telling them that even if they did not return to being one, they were still not his match. In the end, they had nothing to say. It really made people want to laugh. However, it had to be said that Lilith's unintentional words did help Orpheus vent his anger. If it weren't for Lilith, then it would be Noah's turn to help Orpheus vent his anger. By the way, let me tell you another piece of news, Asashel suddenly said. Orpheus and Lilith have already formed a contract with Noah, and it is a servant contract. This time, the three of them will be our trump card. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The dragon god formed a contract with the god slayer? And it is a servant contract? My god, all the gods were in an uproar. Even Shiva's and Sakura's pupils shrunk slightly as their gazes returned to Noah. This person had done something that made even the gods feel powerless. The god slayer and the infinite dragon god? Even Odin laughed bitterly. The first and second place actually formed a contract. This is something that cannot be laughed at, right? Little brother, you are really good. Zeus laughed heartily. He did not have any negative emotions from being bullied by Noah. Even the infinite dragon god was subdued. Then it is not embarrassing for us three brothers to lose to you. The other main gods also began to look at Noah as if they wanted to get to know Noah again. They even looked at each other. And this effect was what Asashel wanted. With the power of the god slayer and the two dragon gods, our chances of winning against the disaster squad are much higher. Asashel looked around at the gods. So, I suggest that this meeting should be the same as the previous one and be led by the god slayer. Does anyone have any objections? Did anyone have any objections? Of course, no one had any objections. Not to mention that Noah was the suppressive force of the various forces, just based on the current situation. If anyone from the myth faction were to take the seat, the other myth's faction would not be convinced. Since that was the case, the only person who could make all the Shura gods willingly give up their seats was Noah. I have no objections. Odin stroked his long beard and was the first to express his opinion. I have no objections either. Zeus followed, as if he did not care about being bullied by Noah last time. He did not hesitate at all. You do have the qualifications. Shiva nodded. Humph, Sakra just snorted softly, silently expressing his agreement. Seeing that Odin, Zeus, Shiva, and Sakra had all agreed, the other main gods looked at each other and finally could only nod. So, Noah became the leader of all the myths faction. Needless to say, this was definitely the first time in history. Noah was not pretentious. He led Orpheus and Lilith straight to the seat of the chief and sat down directly. Then, Sazax, Achuka, Seraph, Felubium, and Asashel sat down one after another. Because the heavenly realm's losses were much more serious than expected, Michael could not leave for the time being and was absent from this meeting. I said that no matter what the final decision is, the heavenly realm will support it. Asashel made such an opening statement. Then, the meeting of the gods begins. Chapter 1943. Pantheon Meeting. It sounded very high-end, but in fact, it was no different from a human meeting. Why did they say that? The reason was simple. After the meeting started, basically, all the gods were talking excitedly. However, they were simply repeating the current information and the future dangers. Heaven and the underworld were attacked at the same time and almost fell. This proves that the opponent has the ability to take down a mythical force. We have to be careful. Nonsense. If it's just an ordinary attack, there's nothing to be afraid of. After all, we have so many forces united now. I'm afraid that we'll be cut off again and be isolated without help. When the time comes, we'll be defeated one by one. Nonsense. The most important thing now is to think of a way to get us through the current crisis. Nonsense. If we can find the headquarters of the group of disasters, then we can take the initiative and directly attack and destroy them. Nonsense. The enemy only relies on the evil dragons. No matter if it's the legendary evil dragons resurrected by the Holy Grail or the mass-produced evil dragons transformed by the Holy Grail, they are the main force of the enemy. If we can solve the danger of the evil dragons, then the enemy has nothing to be afraid of. Still nonsense. Thousands of main gods of mythical forces gathered together and talked so enthusiastically, but in the end, the content of the topic was all nonsense. These things were already known in advance, so the gods needed to gather together and hold such a meeting to come up with a solution, wasn't it? However, in the end, there was no solution. Instead, they kept repeating the information they knew. What could they come up with in the end? Therefore, including Noah, Sazax, Achuka, Seraph, Felubium, and Asashel didn't speak. Odin, Zeus, Shiva, Sakra, and the other main gods didn't participate in it either. They just listened to the repeated nonsense of the gods and kept silent. The so-called too many people referred to this situation. Even if they were gods, once there were too many of them and each of them had their own ideas, it would be impossible for them to unify their opinions. They could only repeat nonsense like this. Of course, some of the wise main gods were very clear about the theme of this meeting, so they didn't participate in this nonsense. They just sat there quietly and said nothing. It was easy to imagine that the main gods who were keeping their mouths shut at this moment were the wise ones who could really play a role in the meeting. Until a certain moment, Sakra spoke impatiently and interrupted the endless nonsense. All right, demons, it's time for you to play your role. Sakra turned his head and looked at the 4 demon kings led by Sazax. As victims, I'm sure you're the ones who know the trickiest part about the Calamity Group. In order to prevent the same thing from happening again, I'm sure you've already prepared the means to resist, right? As soon as Di Shi Tian's words came out, the noisy scene immediately quieted down. Everyone turned their eyes to Sazax, Achuka, Seraph, and Felubium. The four demon kings perked up and looked at each other. We are indeed analyzing tactics to cut off communication, and are also developing a new method of communication. Sazax finally spoke. So, the danger of being isolated and attacked separately should be reduced by a lot. Very good. Odin laughed. Finally, we've heard some useful information. It's just that the enemy's means are not to be underestimated, Azazel said. Let's not talk about the three-headed demonic dragon Az Dahaka who has mastered thousands of spells. Even the guardian dragon Ladin, who is rumored to be the guardian of the golden apple, is in the enemy's camp. That evil dragon's enchantment and protection are very difficult to deal with. It can isolate all of our forces with enchantments, and then attack us separately. In other words, in addition to magic, we also need to prepare means to deal with enchantments. Shiva turned his gaze to Zeus. Greek main god, Ladin is an evil dragon in your mythology. If it's you, you should have means to deal with Ladin, right? If it's just to deal with enchantments, there are plenty. The question is whether it will work on Ladin's enchantment, right? Zeus grinned. Although we don't have such means, if it's the great hero Hercules who defeated Ladin, we can ask him to come out. No one knows better than him how to deal with Ladin. Oh. The gods all let out surprised cries. In Greek mythology, the great hero Hercules was entrusted with 12 impossible tasks. In the end, he completed all of them and became a god. This was a story that everyone knew. Among the 12 tasks, one of them was to obtain the golden apple under the protection of the evil dragon Ladin. In the end, Hercules successfully killed the evil dragon Ladin and obtained the golden apple. Therefore, Hercules should know best how to deal with Ladin. However, while all the gods were pleasantly surprised, Achuka pointed out the main point. Dealing with the evil dragon is not difficult. In fact, although the evil dragon is a threat, almost all of the gods here have the ability to kill it. The real problem is that even if the evil dragon is killed, it can continue to resurrect. It's not difficult to find a way to deal with the evil dragon. The key is to find a way to deal with the Holy Grail. His words woke her up from her dream. That's right. The real problem was the Holy Grail, not the evil dragon. If they didn't find a way to deal with the Holy Grail first, then even if they dealt with the evil dragon, it would be useless in the end. The Holy Grail is in the hands of the Demon King's little brat, right? Odin said thoughtfully. Sure enough, that Demon King's son is the real threat. Can you find a way to find Lesavim's whereabouts? Shiva said slowly. There shouldn't be anyone who knows the former Demon King's son better than the demons, angels, and fallen angels, right? If we can find Lesavim smoothly, then we won't be so passive. Sazax's expression became serious. As early as after the turmoil of the vampires, we began to look for Lesavim. Unfortunately, until now, we haven't found any clues. Speaking of which, aren't there still 2 holy grails with the fallen angels? Sakra glanced at Asashel. Governor of the fallen angels, can't you think of a way? It's easy to say. Asashel couldn't help but be speechless. If there is enough time, maybe we can get some results. The problem is that by that time, it will be too late, right? All the gods suddenly frowned and fell into a dilemma. The key to the problem was Lesavim and the Holy Grail. But, how to find Lesavim and the Holy Grail? When heaven and the underworld were attacked, Lesavim didn't appear at all. He must be hiding in a safe place, watching the disasters and secretly laughing, right? That guy is really a bastard. At the same time, Asashel looked at Noah and asked. Why haven't you said anything? Don't forget that you are the protagonist. Asashel's words made all the gods and Buddhas present focus on Noah. Under the gaze of all the gods, Noah opened his eyes that had been closed and said indifferently. I'm just thinking, if I were Lesavim, I don't need to consider any consequences and want to eliminate all the mythical forces. Is there a shortcut to achieve this goal? Noah's words made all the gods present stunned. A satchel. Noah ignored the stunned gods and suddenly asked. If Lezavim is really as bad as you said, then it shouldn't be strange to let him attack the source of all the mysteries and achieve the goal of eliminating all the mythical forces, right? The source of all the mysteries? Asashel was stunned, then seemed to realize something and gasped. You mean, that's what I was thinking. Noah narrowed his eyes. Lezavim will act soon. With such a sentence, Noah stood up and looked around at all the gods present. If I'm not wrong, Lezavim's next target is not any mythical force, but humans. He will definitely eliminate humans. All the gods present almost instantly understood what Noah meant, and all of them showed a horrified expression. Chapter 1944. Annihilate humans. If Lezavim really did such a thing, then there was no doubt that he could easily annihilate all the mythical powers. Because humans were the root of all mysteries. At least, that was the case in this world. Why could various mythical systems exist? Because of faith. If there was no faith, then no matter if it was a god or a Buddha, they would all die. Because of this, before the peace treaty was concluded, the various mythical powers would reject each other. Because the rest of the mythical powers were competitors for their faith. If it wasn't for the appearance of Noah, who laid the foundation for the peace treaty with his extremely tyrannical and overbearing strength, then it would be almost impossible for Asashel to achieve the peace treaty with all the mythical powers and usher in world peace. Not to mention other things, Shiva and Sakra had been competing for popularity since ancient times. Even if they reached a peace treaty, they were still secretly opposing each other, never stopping for a moment. From this, it could be seen how important faith was to a mythical power. Not to mention the rest of the mythical powers, even demons, angels, and fallen angels had now fallen to the point where they couldn't survive without humans. Even vampires, if they didn't have human blood to survive, sooner or later, they would also go on the road to extinction, no different from the other races and powers. Therefore, once humans really perished, no one would need to do anything. Sooner or later, all the mythical powers would go to extinction and completely disappear from human history. After fully understanding Lezavim from Asashel and Wali, coupled with their previous dealings, Noah had already placed himself in the role of Lezavim, while the gods were arguing endlessly over nonsense, and began to imagine himself in the role of Lezavim. If he was Lezavim, knowing the importance of humans and wanting to annihilate all the mythical powers, would he do something like annihilating all the humans? The answer, yes. Why didn't Lezavim attack the other powers, or even the fallen angels, but only the angels and demons? Because angels and demons are easier to attack? Not necessarily, right? Noah said this when all the gods were shocked. Let's not talk about the angels for now. The demons have Sazax and Achuka. As surpassers who are as famous as Sazax and Achuka, it's impossible for Lezavim not to know how troublesome the two of them are. Instead of attacking the demons, why don't we attack the forces that don't have the top 10 powerhouses in the world, or simply continue to attack the heavily injured vampires? That would undoubtedly be easier to succeed, right? But Lezavim didn't. Instead, he still attacked the angels and demons. Noah looked around at all the gods. At first, I also wondered if Lezavim was unwilling to be expelled from the underworld as the son of the demon king, so he had evil intentions. Or perhaps it was because of his grudge with Sazax and Achuka that he attacked the demons. But in that case, how do you explain his attack on the angels? Now that I think about it, I suddenly feel that Lezavim must have some thoughts when he attacked the angels and demons. Noah knocked on the table. After all, angels and demons are now the races that have the most inseparable relationship with humans. In order to maintain the prosperity of the race, demons had long developed demon pawns with the technical support of Achuka, which could reincarnate creatures of other races into demons. Angels were lives created by the God of the Bible. After the God of the Bible passed away, they could no longer be increased. Therefore, after reaching a peace agreement, they relied on the reincarnation technology of demons to develop means to reincarnate people with deep faith into angels. In today's demon world and angel world, reincarnated people had become an indispensable part. And most of these reincarnated people were humans. Although Lezivim, this surpasser, is the crystallization of malice, I have to say that he's really a lousy guy. Noah curled his lips and smiled. When we were in the vampire's territory, he tried to seal off my trump card, but he neglected the uncontrollable nature of the evil dragon. This time, he launched a sudden attack to divert our attention and make us think that he's planning to attack the various mythical organizations. While we're focused on defending ourselves, he'll be able to proudly attack the humans, right? It's just that the idiot who was occupied by the idea of attacking humans also chose the angels and demons that have the closest relationship with humans. This makes people feel that there's a trace. Noah looked at Athasiel and said, just like how he instigated his son to abuse his grandson for fun and even forbade his son from killing Varley. He never thought that after doing this, when Varley, the child who inherited the power of Lucifer and the White Dragon Emperor, grows up, that kind of hatred will pose a great threat to him. He's just a clown jumping around. In other words, although Lezivim's various malice would cause harm to others, it would also bury endless future troubles for himself every time. The son of the demon king who was immersed in the despair, pain, and confusion of others only thought of enjoying everything. Like a drug addict, he would think of ways to pursue it all day long, but never thought that he was addicted to drugs. He could not achieve anything, but he was good at spoiling things. However, such a lousy guy obtained the Holy Grail, which caused all the disasters. Next, Lezivim's target of attack will be humans. What we should do is not to consider our own defense, but to set up a net in the human world and wait for him to jump in himself. Noah concluded with this sentence. This is my idea. Of course, it's only my idea. Everything is speculation. It's up to you to believe it or not. The over-gods of the various organizations looked at one another when they heard that. They all fell silent. It had to be said that Noah's reasoning was reasonable and well-founded. He had completely unearthed the essence of Lezivim and reached a final conclusion. It was really persuasive. However, this was still only a speculation. If it was wrong, when all the forces were investing their strength in the human world, Lezivim would take advantage of the fact that their defenses were greatly lowered to attack the headquarters of the various forces. What would the consequences be then? It was unimaginable. This possibility was not non-existent. Under such consideration, the various forces really wanted to ignore this speculation and only care about their own safety just in case. However, if that was the case, when the humans were wiped out by Lezivim, they would only be digging their own graves. It was up to the various forces how to make the choice. I agree with Noah's decision. Asashel was the first to express his opinion. That bastard Lezivim will definitely do such a thing. Therefore, the fallen angels will put all their efforts into defense in the human world. After Asashel expressed his opinion, the four demon kings, Sazax, Achuka, Seraph, and Felubium, looked at each other and nodded. The demons will also fully enter the human world to take precautions. The main gods of the various mythical forces hesitated. Sigh. Odin sighed and rubbed his shoulders. It seems that an old man like me will have to accompany you young people to play some exciting games. Norse mythology. Participate. That's true. Zeus grinned. We can't let the humans be wiped out. Greek mythology. Participate. You actually want me, a god of destruction, to do such a thing as protecting the humans. What a joke. Shiva mocked himself and then the corners of his mouth rose. But, it's not my style to be a coward. Indian mythology. Participate. A group of gods are actually led by a little demon left behind by a demon king. That's outrageous. Indra's words were still sarcastic, but he also curled his lips. Forget it. Since we are gods, then we should do something to save the humans. Mount Meru. Participate. Seeing that the four most important mythical forces had announced their participation, the other main gods of the mythical forces began to struggle. In the end, they gritted their teeth and nodded heavily one after another. Egyptian mythology participates. Kettle mythology participates. Roman mythology participates. We will all participate. All the main gods expressed their opinions, making Sazax, Asashel, and the others laugh. Noah suddenly smiled and stood up. From now on, we will fully enter the war to protect the humans. Chapter 1945. The meeting lasted from noon until late at night. It was only when the sky began to brighten slightly that the door of the meeting hall opened. The main gods of the various mythical organizations brought their attendants and immediately activated the teleportation magic formation the moment they stepped out of the door, returning to their base camps. Next, what they needed to do was to arrange the tasks that were just assigned in the meeting, and at the same time, make preparations as much as possible so that they could face Lezavim and the evil dragon army in the human world. Of course, as a precaution, the various mythical organizations also made their own preparations to prevent Lezavim from directly attacking the mythical organizations. And all of this had to be done secretly. If Lezavim sensed that the human world had set up an inescapable defense, then that guy would definitely not appear again, or he would simply turn around and attack the various mythical organizations whose defenses were greatly reduced. If that happened, then it would be troublesome. Therefore, the defense of the human world had to be carried out quietly until the moment Lezavim appeared and dealt a fatal blow. After the main gods left the meeting hall one by one and returned to their base camps through the teleportation magic formation, Noah and the others slowly walked out. Then, we'll also go back and make preparations. Sazax turned his head and looked at Noah. If there's anything, just contact us directly. Yes, Seraphil said with a smile. You should have our contact information in that phone of yours. Don't be shy, try to contact us as much as you can. Got it. Noah nodded. Go on with your work. The four demon kings, Sazax, Achuka, Seraphil, and Felubium immediately activated the teleportation magic formation and left the meeting hall under the watchful eyes of Noah and Asashel. At the same time, a god walked out of the meeting hall and came to Noah. To be honest, I'd like to have a fight with you. As soon as he came in front of Noah, the most famous god of destruction in Hindu mythology, Shiva, looked straight at Noah and said such a sentence. In this world, there aren't many people who can threaten me, and I've never challenged any of them before. You're one of the most outstanding people among them. If I can destroy you, it will be very interesting, right? His words made Arthashel's expression turn serious. Orpheus and Lilith, who had been quietly following Noah, raised their heads and looked at Shiva with their dark eyes. Just this alone was enough to cause a wave of pressure to fill the air. However, Shiva was not surprised. Instead, he was happy. He looked at Orpheus and Lilith with joy. The infinite dragon god, who had always stood aloof from worldly affairs and was uninterested in anything no matter how much one provoked him, actually had such a reaction because of a human. Just being able to see this scene is enough to make me sigh. There are indeed benefits to living for so long. Shiva looked at Noah and said, Don't worry, I won't trouble you at a time like this. I just hope that one day, you can agree to my request and play with me. Hearing this, Noah looked at Shiva's burning eyes and said indifferently, Sure. Anytime. Shiva smiled in satisfaction. He turned around and disappeared from where he stood. There was no sign of him moving at all. Do you really want to fight with that god of destruction? Arthashel could not help but ask. He is the most powerful god besides the real Red Dragon Emperor and the infinite dragon god. Even Sakra, who is known as the most powerful martial god, doesn't want to confront him directly. In the era when the real Red Dragon Emperor and the infinite dragon god don't appear, he is the most powerful. If the two of you fight, won't the world be turned upside down? Hearing Arthashel's words, Noah did not have time to answer before a mocking laugh sounded. At least, compared to playing with the little devil left behind by the former demon king, the play between the god slayer and the god of destruction should be more attractive, right? With that, Sakura walked out of the venue. Even if he is a god slayer, he is still a human after all. His life is limited, unlike a god. As long as there are no accidents, there wouldn't be any problem even if he lived until the end of the world. Sakura came in front of Noah and looked at him closely as he grinned. Leaving behind endless glory in a limited time, that's how humans have always lived. Every human who can challenge the gods will leave behind glory that coexists with history. You don't want to die in obscurity, do you? Arthashel shut his mouth. Orpheus and Lilith also became silent. Only Noah met Sakura's gaze and said this with a lukewarm tone. Do you think you know humans very well? I don't know them well, I should say that I have seen a lot. After living for so many years, what kind of humans have I not seen? Sakura shook his head and said. I just want to remind you that holding power that doesn't belong to humans and making all gods revere you is indeed amazing. But doesn't it mean that if you are stronger, then everyone will be at your mercy? With that said, Sakura looked at Noah with a completely different expression than Shiva. If it was said that Shiva's gaze towards Noah was filled with burning fighting intent, then Sakura's gaze towards Noah was filled with boundless ambition. Then, Dishur Tian left behind such a sentence. Don't underestimate a god. After saying that, Dishur Tian passed by Noah's figure and gradually disappeared like a cloud of mist. That attitude was simply arrogant to the extreme. However, Noah and Arthashel looked at each other, one curled his lips and laughed, the other gloated. It seems that guy is really afraid of you, Arthashel said. He actually couldn't help but say these words of bravado in front of you. That doesn't seem like something a guy called the strongest Einherjar would do. Noah shrugged and didn't say anything. On the contrary, Arthashel's expression suddenly became serious and said such a piece of news. Do you know? The people of the Hero sect have actually become Sakura's vanguard? Hero sect? Noah was slightly startled and said in surprise. Those guys were released by you? It should be said that they were all softened by Sakura, Arthashel said helplessly. After you showed your skills last time, Sakura requested to meet with a few people of the Hero sect. Later, he asked to release them, intending to take those descendants of heroes under his command and work for him. In the end, you agreed just like that? Noah was speechless. Really generous. There are 3 holders of the God's Extinguishment Tool in the Hero sect, right? In fact, Sakura came for Chow Chow, Galgar, and Leonardo, the 3 holders of the God's Extinguishment Tool. Arthashel spread out his hands. If it was in the past, of course, we wouldn't agree to let them go so easily and be used by that ambitious guy who wants to defeat Shiva all day long. But with you as a restraint, Sakura can't make any waves. We just went with the flow and let Sakura owe us a big favor. However, now it seems that Sakura didn't take Chow Chow, Galgar, and Leonardo under his command just to increase his combat power to deal with Shiva. Arthashel looked at Noah with some worry. That guy, it's very likely that because of your appearance, he had the idea of taking the God's Extinguishment Tool from the Hero sect. After all, the only weakness of Noah who could use another cosmology was humans. Only humans could defeat Noah. Sakura probably wanted to rely on Chow Chow, Galgar, and Leonardo to restrain Noah, right? In this regard, Noah's eyes flashed and the corner of his mouth rose. Chow Chow is indeed a talent. Even God and Demon King can't ignore him. But since he couldn't win against me before, it's impossible for him to win against me in the future. As for the other 2, it's not a big deal. Let Sakura torment them however he wants. With that, Noah waved at Arthashel and left the scene with Orpheus and Lilith. That kid. Arthashel shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, but the corner of his mouth rose. I hope Sakura has some self-awareness. Otherwise, provoking that monster will be the end of Mount Meru. Chapter 1946. After leaving the venue, Noah brought Orpheus and Lilith to the Jumanli's house. Only there could Noah use the teleportation magic circle that connected to the supernatural research department to return to the human world. Although the Jumanli family was currently dealing with the aftermath of the chaos in the demon realm and was temporarily not at the Jumanli's house, the magic circle was fixed and directly engraved in Lilith's room. Noah only needed to inject magic power into it to be able to use it. However, halfway through, Noah suddenly stopped. Orpheus and Lilith immediately stopped in their tracks as though they had sensed something. Noah looked up slightly and suddenly spoke. "Orpheus, Lilith, go to the gift card first and find Aster and Athena to accompany you. I have something to deal with for the time being." After Asashal's transformation, the environment in the gift card had changed greatly. It was as if it was located in a resort, and there was almost everything that could be enjoyed. With Orpheus, Lilith, Aster, and Athena as companions, there was no need to be afraid of loneliness and boredom. Moreover, after Asashal's transformation, Noah did not need to take out the gift card at any time. Any existence that had a contract with Noah could return to the gift card that Noah had stored in his body at any time with just a thought. Therefore, Orpheus and Lilith both looked up and glanced at Noah. Orpheus said without rhyme or reason, "He's very tricky." "I know," Noah replied without looking back. "But I can handle it." Orpheus nodded, held Lilith's hand, and didn't say anything else. Immediately, the two dragon gods turned into a burst of light particles and disappeared into the air. Only Noah was left at the scene. No. There was another person. A black-robed young man who had appeared out of nowhere and was leaning against a rock. His pair of different-colored eyes, one gold and one black, were staring at Noah without moving away for a moment. Surprisingly, it was Klon Kvoch. What a surprise. Noah looked straight ahead. "And here I thought that you would continue to train like before after leaving the disaster." "That's what I did," Kron Kovac said without hiding anything. "It's just that I won't stay in one place forever. Training is only one of my goals. I have another." "Purpose?" Noah narrowed his eyes. "Observation dragon?" "That's right." Klon Kovacs nodded. "Where there are dragons, there will be me." "That's just like you." Noah sounded like he had known Klon Kovac for a long time. "Then, did you come to the underworld because there are dragons here?" "There are many dragons who reincarnate as demons. There are even many dragons who reincarnate as demons and live in the underworld. The human world is no longer suitable for dragons to live in, so compared to the human world, the underworld is more attractive to me." Klon Kovac seemed to become talkative when it came to dragons. "In the past, I came to the underworld many times and saw many dragons here. Their way of life interested me, but I still don't understand what a dragon is." Saying this, Klon Kovac propped himself up and stopped leaning against the rock, facing Noah. "In the past, the two heavenly dragons were also my targets of observation," Klon Kovac said. "But they didn't care about me at all. They just kept fighting. Even after they were killed and their souls were sealed in the divine artifact, they kept fighting, fighting. I don't understand. As heavenly dragons, they are only second to the dragon god. Why do they keep fighting? Are they real dragons?" Klon Kovac seemed to be reminiscing about something as he kept talking. "It's not just the two heavenly dragons. Most of the other dragons like to fight, even I am no exception. Gods, humans, demons and other existences even call dragons the aggregation of power. Since that's the case, is displaying power the essence of a dragon? But if that's the case, why doesn't the dragon god Orpheus fight with anyone? Why does he only watch the development of the world quietly? Why does the real emperor god Crimson Dragon only want to fly in the dimensional gap?" Klon Kovac shook his head. As the top existences of the dragon tribe, the infinite dragon god and the emperor god Crimson Dragon are different from other dragons. They don't display their power at all. So, which one is the real dragon? At this point, Kron Kovac's tone became unprecedentedly persistent. "I want to know this. I want to know what a dragon is. For this, no matter how long it takes, I will continue to observe." What is a dragon? This was Clone Kuvaka's persistence. Getting the answer to this question could be said to be the meaning of Clone Kuvaka's long life. Sure Tian was right about one thing. Human life is short. So, humans will pursue glory in their limited lives, hoping to leave behind traces to prove their existence after they die. Compared to humans, the lives of gods, demons, dragons and other existences were too long. If they were like humans and did everything they wanted to do in less than 100 years, then how would they live for thousands of years? By that time, wouldn't they be walking corpses? So, demons, angels, fallen angels and even Asura gods and Buddhas had their own persistence. That was the meaning of their survival. Lias wanted to become the king of the ranked game. Tsang wanted to build a school that anyone could enter to teach the ranked game. Indra wanted to defeat Shiva. Shiva wanted to show all of the god of destruction. Even the 4 demon kings had the goal of changing the demons and making them prosper again. Asashal wanted world peace, and everyone's goal was very distant. And Clone Kuvak wanted to know what a dragon was. You have made a contract with the dragon god, right? Clone Kuvak said. You can attract Orpheus and Lilith, and you are the Red Dragon Emperor who is different from the previous generations. Can you show me the real dragon? Noah was silent. This question was simply unsolvable. In the eyes of 1,000 people, there were 1,000 hamlets. In the eyes of different people, dragons were also different existences. Humans generally believed that demons were evil creatures. However, in reality, there were kind and gentle demons like Jamanli's kin, and there were also evil demons like Lesavim. Just like how there were good and evil humans, one could not directly give an absolute definition. It was the same for dragons. Because of this, even if Clone Kuvak had survived from the mythological era until now, he still couldn't find an answer. Under such circumstances, Noah suddenly opened his mouth. In the past, there was a time when I thought that humans were simply hopeless. They were a group of people who wore human skin on the surface, but hid darkness in their hearts. Noah's sudden words made Clone Kuvak stunned. However, Noah was already immersed in his memories. Recalling what he experienced in the world of Black Bullet, Noah let out a sigh. At that time, humans were facing a disaster, but in the face of the disaster, they showed an unimaginable ugly side. In order to survive, adults didn't hesitate to let a group of children die. Even before the disaster arrived, it was as if they gave up everything, burning, killing, robbing, and committing all kinds of evil. Noah slightly clenched his fist. His voice had a rare murderous aura and anger. At that time, I really thought that humans were simply hopeless. I even had the thought of personally wiping out all the humans in that world to prevent the ugliness of human nature from spreading. After saying this, Noah bitterly laughed. However, in the end, I still gave up and even saved those humans. Upon hearing this, Clone Kuvak asked almost instinctively. Why? Because, even if some people really deserved to die, there were still people who were worth saving. Noah suddenly smiled. Humans are such contradictory existences. I think dragons are the same. Therefore, I really can't answer your question. Clone Kuvak once again fell silent. After a while, Clone Kuvak raised his head and looked at Noah, saying, "You're right. Let's have a fight." Hearing this, Noah didn't hesitate this time. Okay. Chapter 1947. In the dark sky, traces of light began to appear, and dawn gradually arrived. Under the slightly brightening sky, 2 figures slowly floated up into the sky. They only came to a stop when they were above the clouds. Clone Kuvak opened and closed his palm, and a crisp sound like bone and flesh rubbing against each other echoed in the air. It was not hard to imagine how powerful that palm was. At the same time, Clone Kuvaka's gaze was fixed on Noah, and what emerged from within was no longer confusion and stubbornness, but a surging fighting spirit. It was just like what Clone Kuvak had said. Other than the Red Dragon Emperor and the Infinite Dragon God, the other dragons were all competitive masters. Even the dark dragon known as the New Moon, and the strongest evil dragon, Clone Kuwak, were like that. In order to have a better battle, Clone Kuwak had even acted together with the Disaster Squad, and followed the rest of the evil dragons into the vampire world with Lezivim. It was not hard to imagine that Clone Kuwak was definitely a battle maniac no less than Varley. Therefore, almost at the same time when his fighting spirit was boiling, Clone Kuwak completely forgot his previous purpose. The reason why Clone Kuwak wanted to fight with Noah was to see what this unprecedented Red Dragon Emperor would show him, and to see if he could get some answers to the questions in his heart. However, as soon as the battle began, Clone Kuwak suddenly forgot his purpose, and wholeheartedly devoted himself to the battle. I have already fought with the White Dragon Emperor of the 2 heavenly dragons. Clone Kuwak's voice rang out. This time, let me see what you, the Red Dragon Emperor of the 2 heavenly dragons, will show me. As soon as his voice fell. Clang! A burst of thick black light burst out from Clone Kuwak's body, and instantly covered his entire body. In the dense light, the black robe on Clone Kuwak's body directly exploded, and his body suddenly expanded. At a speed visible to the naked eye, he rapidly grew stronger. Not long after, a huge dragon with a pitch-black luster appeared in the air amidst the thick, pitch-black light. It stared at Noah with a pair of different-colored eyes, one gold and one black. The ferocious dragon suddenly raised its head. Roar, 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 roar. A storm-like roar reverberated from the pitch-black evil dragon's mouth, and turned into rolling sound waves that blew in all directions. Noah's robe flapped by the storm-like sound waves, but his body was as steady as a mountain. He looked at Clone Kuwak, who had turned into a huge black dragon, and said softly, "Are you going to use your full strength from the start?" Not sure if it heard Noah's whisper, Clone Kuwak, who let out a violent roar, grinned sinisterly and said so. "After all, we've already greeted each other last time." "That's true." Noah suddenly smiled. "If that's the case, then I'll also be serious from the start." After saying that, Noah raised one of his arms. Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. Under Noah's command, the scarlet red boosted gear burst out in a flash, and a ferocious dragon claw-like protective gear covered Noah's arm. "Drake," Noah said softly. "Go. Then use your full strength." "Partner." Drake's voice sounded from the boosted gear. "Let the strongest evil dragon witness our full power as the Scarlet Dragon Emperor." Obviously, Drake's fighting spirit had been ignited. At that moment, Noah smiled faintly, and raised his arm that was covered by the scarlet red boosted gear. Balance breaker. The boosted gear inlaid on the back of the boosted gear suddenly released a dazzling light. Accompanied by a muffled explosion, a violent wave of scarlet air burst out from Noah's body and turned into a scarlet dragon's shadow. Like a mirage, it stacked on top of Noah's body. The scarlet red boosted gear that was shining with a dazzling light was instantly disintegrated and turned into illusory scales that merged into the dragon's shadow. The scales on the mirage-like dragon's shadow became extremely clear and lifelike. It was like a small red dragon, emitting a terrifying aura. That aura continued to soar, rising at a frightening rate. In just an instant, it was evenly matched with Clone Kuwak. In fact, there was even a faint trace of it surpassing the latter. Feeling the suffocating pressure, Clone Kuwak was not shocked but delighted. What a refreshing dragon wave. Undoubtedly, it's only a balance breaker, but it's already as powerful as the White Dragon Emperor's extreme tyrannical dragon. Even without using a divine artifact, Noah had now reached a 4-digit level. With a solid foundation, Noah's strength naturally increased explosively when using the boosted gear. He was now comparable to the top 10 masters in the world. So, unlike Wally, who only has the strength of a sky dragon, I have the strength of a real sky dragon. Noah, whose body was swelling with scarlet air, raised his eyes and stared at Clone Kuwak. His astonishing aura kept rising. "If you don't take this seriously, you'll die." Hearing this, Clone Kuwak did not say anything. He grinned, and the dragon power turned into a pitch-black flame that kept rising from his body. Roar, 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 roar. The next moment, Clon Kuak let out a roar that shook the air. The pitch-black flame that was rising around him suddenly started to rotate like a pitch-black tornado. The tornado was not large at first, but with the support of the violent dragon power, it expanded to hundreds of meters in the blink of an eye. High up in the clouds, a pitch-black tornado spun madly, forcefully stirring up the clouds below, turning them into a whirlpool, twisting and turning. Looking at the huge tornado, Noah let out a low roar. The endless energy in his body instantly turned into divine power and surged into Noah's raised arm. Hum. Suddenly, a bright light flashed above Noah's raised arm, condensing into a spear of light that gradually expanded. Boost, 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 boost. A voice that symbolized the multiplication of power rang out from the scarlet dragon's shadow on Noah's body. As the voice rang out, the spear of light shone brightly and crazily expanded. In an instant, it was like a pillar of light that connected the heavens and the earth, illuminating the whole world. Immediately, as if their hearts were connected, Noah and Clon Kuak moved at the same time. Hum. The huge pitch-black tornado, with an ear-piercing buzzing sound, swept toward Noah crazily. Wherever the storm passed, the clouds below were all torn apart and sucked into it. Like a cloud of fog, they lingered around the pitch-black tornado. Even Noah's robe billowed crazily under the sweeping of the tornado. However, there was no fear in Noah's eyes. Looking at the terrifying pitch-black tornado that was sweeping toward him, Noah's eyes sharpened. With a shake of his arm, he threw out the giant spear of light that was like a pillar that supported the sky. Swoosh! The instant the sharp sound of air being split apart appeared, the enormous light spear that illuminated the entire place shot out explosively. It drew a straight meteor-like trajectory in the air and disappeared in a flash as it rushed towards the wild and violent dark black tornado. On one side was a tornado that was as violent as flames. On the other side was a spear of light that was as dazzling as the sun. The two behemoths instantly closed the distance between them. Then, they collided with a loud bang. At the moment of collision, the world suddenly became silent. Accompanied by a roar, a terrifying shockwave spread out in the sky, wreaking havoc in a frenzy. The pitch-black tornado and the bright spear of light fiercely collided, releasing a terrifying power that caused the space to ripple slightly. Then, the tornado and the spear of light bloomed with a dazzling light and exploded with a loud bang. Chapter 1948. Boom! When an earth-shattering roar resounded in the sky, it was as if a star had exploded. The dazzling light and violent impact turned into the most terrifying ripples of power that fluctuated in the entire sky, scattering the clouds below and even shaking the space. In the dazzling light, a crimson streamer rode on the violent impact and quickly slid back like a sailboat sailing on the sea in a storm. Feeling the terrifying ripples of power that came head-on, Noah used all his strength to maintain his forbidden hand and let the air scales resist the ripples of power so that they would not affect him. If the advantage of Chow Chow's forbidden hand was that it could cope with all kinds of situations, then the advantage of Noah's forbidden hand was its defensive power. With the ability of the air scales, the defensive power of Noah's forbidden hand was many times stronger than the original forbidden hand. Even with the terrifying ripples of power, it was still able to resist them as usual. Without the air scales, Noah could only convert his divine power into magic power and use Crush to resist the impact in order to not be injured. Now, he did not need to go through so much trouble. All of it was blocked by the solid air scales. However, even if the air scales blocked the terrifying ripples of power, the violent impact still did not subside. At this moment, Noah's perception ability suddenly transmitted a warning sign, causing his eyes to harden. He abruptly lifted his head and looked to the front. Amidst the violent impact and dazzling light, a giant black dragon flapped the wings on its back. Its huge body was like a bolt of black lightning, and it instantly passed through the layers of power ripples. Amidst the faint sound of breaking through the air, it darted in front of Noah. Even Noah had to use the air scales to resist the ripples of power. Cloned Kuwak rushed over just like that. The scales on its body were already covered with cracks like cracked glass. Blood even seeped out and dyed its body red. However, Clone Kuwa ignored his injuries as if he couldn't feel any pain at all. He rushed to Noah's front and stared at Noah with a pair of eyes, one gold and one black. His eyes were filled with cold killing intent. Immediately after, Clone Kuwa raised his hand, and a sharp dragon claw swept out, bringing with it a whistling wind. It fluctuated with a rich black dragon power, and like a cold blade light, it slashed across. Clang! The sharp dragon claws that were as cold as a blade light slashed across the crimson air scales, causing a crisp sound of metal clashing and leaving a mark on the crimson dragon's shadow. Roar! Cloned Kuwak roared. After its attack failed, it suddenly exploded. Its two huge dragon claws brought along a burst of black light as it violently tore apart the obstruction of the air. With an ear-piercing sound, it was like a violent storm as it slashed towards Noah. Clang, 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 clang. The sharp dragon claws fell on the crimson air scales like raindrops. Not only did it cause a series of chaotic clashing sounds, but it also set off a series of air explosions and shockwaves that appeared continuously in midair. The terrifying force fell on the air scales one after another. Although it did not hurt Noah, it made Noah feel as if he had been hit hard. His body could not help but be pushed back and was shaken away again and again. Cloned Kuwak seemed to have transformed into a meat grinder. It relentlessly chased after Noah and waved its claws like a storm, shaking the air scales of Noah again and again. Crack! At a certain moment, a crisp cracking sound was heard. A crack finally appeared on Noah's air scales and was clearly imprinted in Cloned Kuwak's eyes. However, this time, Cloned Kuwak was not happy. Instead, he was shocked. This was because Noah did not attempt to counterattack in the storm of attacks. Instead, he allowed Cloned Kuwak to attack fiercely. His pitch-black eyes were fixed on a scale below Cloned Kuwak's neck. Under the impact of the energy ripples just now, Cloned Kuwak's dragon scales were almost all cracked. Only that dragon scale was intact and its color was deeper than the rest. At this moment, Noah allowed Cloned Kuwak to attack fiercely. His eyes were fixed on that dragon scale. Divine power surged in his hands and a dazzling light condensed within it. Cloned Kuwak knew that Noah could use a power similar to the light power of angels and fallen angels. And that power was now frantically condensing. His target was the only unbroken dragon scale of Cloned Kuwak. Cloned Kuwak understood. His weakness had been seen through. Just like how snakes had a weakness of 7 inches, dragons, which were closely related to snakes, also had a weakness to a certain extent. In Cloned Kuwak's case, that was the dragon scale. Once that dragon scale was pierced, Cloned Kuwak would not die, but he would lose control of his power for a short period of time. Even though Cloned Kuwak had reached the level of a heavenly dragon after a long period of training, he had only overcome this weakness to a certain extent. He had not completely overcome it. Once that dragon scale was broken, Cloned Kuwak would still be unable to use his power for a second. In front of a heavenly dragon rank opponent, this 1 second was the most fatal weakness. Cloned Kuwak roared again and stopped his fierce attacks. His huge body suddenly moved and directly crashed into Noah. Bang! Amidst the muffled sounds, the violent force suddenly sent Noah flying backward. Due to the friction with the air, he was forced to retreat a distance of several hundred meters. Beautiful! Noah could not help but praise. Under the protection of the air scale, Noah did not suffer any harm. However, Cloned Kuwak's attack was not meant to attack Noah. It was only meant to send Noah flying and increase the distance between him and Noah to avoid being attacked at a weak point. Unfortunately, Noah was not to be trifled with. The moment he was sent flying by Cloned Kuwak, Noah resolutely released the divine power that he had been gathering in his hand. A burst of bright brilliance suddenly appeared and abruptly contracted into a cone shape. It carried a terrifying energy, and like a drill breaking through the sky, it shot towards cloned Kawaka's direction. The speed of the cone of light was extremely terrifying. It was almost like a flash. In just a flash, it was already not far from Kua's body. Moreover, it was spinning at an extremely fast speed. With a terrifying penetrative force, it directly hit the undamaged dragon scales below Kua's neck. "It's not that easy," cloned Kawak growled. His body suddenly surged with an astonishing amount of dragon power. Like a slowly burning flame, it spun at a high speed in a spiral shape and enveloped cloned Kawaka's entire body. Dong! The crazily spinning light cone fell directly on the flaming vortex-like dragon power and heavily collided with each other, causing a deafening collision sound to reverberate. In the end, under the resistance of the flaming vortex-like dragon power, the light cone was actually blocked and was in a deadlock. Gee! The sharp light cone spun crazily and crazily collided with the pitch-black flaming vortex, causing an ear-piercing sound that was like glass being scraped continuously, piercing one's eardrums. Roar, 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 roar. Cloned Kawak roared towards the sky, causing the dragon power in his body to expand to the maximum limit, directly covering the dazzling light cone. Under the suppression of the pitch-black flame-like dragon power, the light cone finally trembled abruptly, dimmed little by little, and finally was gradually annihilated. However, before cloned Kawak could heave a sigh of relief, a chain of light suddenly swept over. Before cloned Kawak could react, it wrapped around his body and tightly bound him within. Then, the chain of light tightened fiercely and directly pulled cloned Kawak, who was caught off guard, forward. There, Noah tightly held the chain of light in one hand and tightly clenched his other hand into a fist. The crimson air waves on his body surged violently. Boost, 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 boost. The chaotic voice reverberated in the air. Noah's tightly clenched fist fiercely punched out, completely disrupting the atmosphere. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.